Ellen Higginbottom was born in 1998 in Boothstown, a suburb of Salford, just a short drive from Wigan. She was raised by her parents, Mike and Kay, in a loving and supportive home. Ellen is the pride of her family not only because of her accomplishments but also because of her kindness. She was a gifted musician who loved both performing and listening to music, and she had a deep passion for horses and equestrianism. Ellen's love for animals was one of her most defining traits. Since childhood, she has dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, which has motivated her to always work hard in her studies. For her, the passion for animals is not just a hobby but also a purpose in life. While studying psychology at Winstanley College, Ellen hoped to combine her interest in animal behavior with her academic pursuits. Ellen lives with her boyfriend of 2 years, Ryan Warren, who affectionately calls her a gem because of her unique and charming personality. The two dream of a future filled with traveling the world, building a home, and starting a family. However, Ellen had some flaws. She joked about getting lost in parks or forgetting her lines during school plays. Those quirks made people love her even more. It was June 16, 2017, in Wigan, a quiet district in Greater Manchester. The sun is shining, and Orrell Water Park is alive with dog walkers, joggers, and families enjoying the warm afternoon. This nature reserve, with its winding paths and tranquil lake, feels like a haven, a place where nothing bad could ever happen. But on this day, something unthinkable did. That day, Ellen walked through Orrell Water Park, perhaps lost in her thoughts or listening to a favorite song. She had been preparing for her A-levels, focusing on the promising future that lay ahead, but she never returned home. At around 1:43 p.m., she sent a playful Snapchat to her friends, joking that she had been in the park for 20 minutes and was already lost. Her message, laced with her trademark wit, made her friends laugh, as she was always up for a joke. However, as the hours passed, that message ended up being the last anyone would hear from her. By 7:20 p.m., her family grew worried. She wasn't the type of person to disappear without saying a word. Her disappearance was so out of character that her father, Mike, contacted Greater Manchester Police. Something was wrong. Very wrong. As police began their investigation, they turned to those who knew her best, trying to reconstruct her final hours. Did she encounter someone by chance? Could clues lie in her daily habits? Ellen's friends confirmed that she had been at Orrell Water Park earlier that afternoon, with her last known activity being a playful Snapchat sent at 1:43 p.m. The police immediately categorized her disappearance as highly unusual and took urgent action. Orrell Water Park, a 70-acre nature reserve with trails, lakes, and wooded areas, was a local favorite for its tranquility. However, as night fell, the vast area became difficult to search. Based on Ellen's Snapchat activity and reports from friends who had seen her walking in the park after leaving college around 1 p.m., police focused their search there. Meanwhile, her friends turned to social media, sharing emotional messages and pleas for information. By midnight, an extensive search operation was underway. Ground teams and a police helicopter equipped with heat-seeking technology combed the park and its surroundings. The helicopter quickly became a crucial tool in the search, but in an unexpected way. While scanning the area, it detected a heat source, not in the park itself but in an adjacent farmer's field near some marshland. The heat signature revealed a person running away. Could it be Ellen? Had she gotten lost or injured? The helicopter crew guided officers to the location of the heat source. When the search team entered the crop field, they made a shocking discovery. Ellen's body was found in tall grass, lying near a fence and partially clothed. Her lower back and legs were exposed, suggesting a hasty or interrupted situation. Ellen's death was caused by 2 severe and deep wounds, particularly to her neck, either of which would have been fatal. The brutality of the injuries indicated a prolonged attack. Additional defensive wounds on her arms suggested she had tried to fight back. Detective Superintendent Howard Millington led the high-priority investigation to uncover the truth. The wheat field, where Ellen was discovered, revealed disturbing evidence: a spade, a leather belt, and signs of a planned attack. However, her backpack, cell phone, and laptop were missing. This pointed to a calculated perpetrator who may have spent hours, or longer, planning the crime. The police's first task was to piece together Ellen's final movements. She left Winstanley College at around 1 p.m. on June 16 and headed to Oral Water Park. A Snapchat post at 1:43 p.m. confirmed she was there. But what happened in the crucial 20 minutes before the attack, estimated to have occurred around 2 p.m., remained a mystery. The field, located just a short distance from the college, was an isolated area hidden from the park's main paths by dense vegetation. It wasn't a place Ellen would have gone willingly, suggesting she had been lured or forced there. Police cordoned off a large section of the park and set up a forensic tent to protect the scene. As daylight broke, news of Ellen's death spread, prompting local residents to leave flowers at the park's entrance. Investigators turned their attention to the visitors in the park that day, calling for witnesses and asking about anyone who might have been acting suspiciously in recent days. Detective Superintendent Howard Millington, heading the investigation, highlighted a report from June 15, just a day earlier, of 2 women being followed in the park. Could the incidents be connected? Given the state of Ellen's clothing and the nature of the attack, police didn't rule out the possibility of an abuse motive. The community was deeply shaken. Winstanley College urged students to avoid walking near the park alone. Detectives canvassed Wigan, knocking on doors and speaking to anyone who might have seen Ellen. They started with those closest to her. Her boyfriend, Ryan, was one of the first to be questioned, not as a suspect, but to help construct a timeline. Ryan was cooperative, sharing texts and memories of their future plans, which included marriage. Ellen's friends described her as cautious, unlikely to go anywhere with a stranger. Her parents, Mike and Kay, said she had no enemies or conflicts. Ellen was known to be kind and gentle, even saving spiders rather than killing them. These interviews ruled out personal motives and led investigators to believe this was likely a random attack, a chilling and rare occurrence. The park itself became a key focus of the investigation. The police issued an urgent appeal, calling for anyone who had been in the park between noon and 3 p.m. that day to come forward with information. During a press conference, Howard emphasized that even the smallest details could prove crucial. One witness, a retiree walking his dog, recalled seeing a man loitering near the wheat field around 1:30 p.m. A major breakthrough came from the police helicopter deployed during the search. Using heat-seeking technology, it detected a person fleeing the wheat field area at around 2 a.m., just before Ellen's body was found. Officers on the ground were guided to the location, but the figure escaped into the night. The timing of this incident raised suspicions, leading the police to hypothesize that the perpetrator might have returned to the scene to remove or hide evidence but fled upon noticing the helicopter. This prompted a forensic sweep of the field, where investigators discovered DNA on the belt and shovel. This was a significant discovery, as these items did not belong to Ellen, and the DNA did not match anyone she knew. Instead, it was a stranger's DNA, and it was fresh. The marks around Ellen's ankles also appeared to suggest that the belt had been used to drag her from the attack site to the field where her body was discovered. Faced with the new evidence, the police appealed to the community for information, especially regarding Ellen's missing items. This tactic proved successful when a local resident came forward with vital information. This led investigators to a nearby woodland area where a fire had been burning. At the site, among the embers of the dying fire, police found some of Ellen's possessions, including her laptop and keys. They quickly determined that the fire was a clumsy attempt to destroy evidence and conceal the fact that the items had ever been in someone's possession. Following the discovery of Ellen's missing belongings burned in a woodland area, the police made a breakthrough. On Sunday, June 18th, they made the first arrest, a 47-year-old man from Billinga, a suburb of Wigan near the park. His name was David Steele, and he lived on Oakley Avenue, close enough to walk to the crime scene. Witnesses identified him trying to set fire to items in the woods. He was known locally and had a minor criminal record for theft. Neighbors described him as quiet but odd, often seen walking alone at night. Police searched his home and seized clothes and electronics, but he denied any involvement, claiming he had been at home all day Friday. Police subsequently made 2 additional arrests in and around the Oral area. David was charged with handling stolen goods and obstructing justice, along with 2 others, 30-year-old Dean Speakman and 30-year-old Vicky Calland, both from Billing. Who were these 3 suspects, and how were they connected to Ellen's death? As police investigated further, they found no forensic evidence linking the trio to the murder scene. However, the suspects were found in possession of Ellen's stolen laptop and cell phone and had attempted to burn them, despite knowing the items were tied to the murder. How did they obtain the laptop and cell phone? That would soon be addressed. Police received the results of DNA testing from the belt, which changed the course of the investigation. The belt found near Ellen had both Ellen's DNA and the DNA of a man. It matched a man named Mark Buckley. Mark Buckley, a 51-year-old man, lives 20 miles from Wigan. He and his mother lived in a house near the park. However, he was moved to Preston after being convicted of arson in 2016 for setting fire to a neighbor's car. The police arrested Mark and informed him of his rights, saying that he was under arrest on suspicion of murder. They also stated that anything he said may be used as evidence. Mark appeared confused during the arrest and asked for help. The officers reassured him they would secure his property and notified him they had a warrant to search his flat. He was then transported to the station for questioning. When police searched Mark's flat, they discovered a bag containing rope, a ligature, an empty condom packet, and lubricant, items that pointed to a disturbing intent. DNA evidence from the belt and spade linked Mark to the crime. Although the arrest marked a major breakthrough, officers remained cautious in their approach. During questioning, Mark was evasive, admitting he had been in the park but insisting that he had merely found Ellen's belongings. His criminal record revealed past crimes such as arson, theft, and minor offenses in the 1990s, but it showed no history of violent behavior, a detail that perplexed investigators. Senior investigating officer Bob Tong later acknowledged that Mark's record didn't suggest this type of crime, but the evidence told a different story. He stated that the contents of the bag suggested a deliberate attack and that Mark had been there that day with intent. To strengthen their case, police revisited witness statements. A dog walker said he saw a man similar in appearance to Mark, chubby, with a shaved head, carrying a bag, appear near the park entrance around noon. Another witness recounted a disturbing interaction. On Thursday, June 15th, a man had approached her and asked if she often walked alone. Although she initially dismissed the encounter, her description matched Mark. These accounts suggested that Mark had spent days in the park, watching and waiting. Despite the forensic evidence against him, Mark continued to deny any involvement in Ellen's murder. However, the police obtained CCTV footage showing Mark heading toward Oral Water Park shortly after 1 p.m. The footage revealed that he had left home early in the morning, dressed warmly in a thick jacket and trousers, while carrying a green shopping bag. Later, the same camera captured him returning home, this time with the bag appearing full and no longer wearing the coat. He was dressed only in a tank top and shorts. Despite being confronted with this video evidence, he continued to deny any connection to Ellen's murder. Meanwhile, other suspects in custody, David, Dean, and Vicky, began cooperating with the investigation. They admitted to being friends with Mark and revealed how they had come into possession of Ellen's belongings. They explained that Mark had visited them and handed over a backpack containing items stolen from Ellen, including her laptop and keys. He had also sold her cell phone to one of them. Police later uncovered additional CCTV footage showing Mark returning to the park late Friday night, likely intending to move Ellen's body. This plan was interrupted by a police helicopter. The court would later conclude that he intended to bury Ellen under the cover of darkness. These CCTV footage recordings, along with DNA evidence and recovered stolen items, have created a clear picture of guilt, although the police are still investigating the possibility of accomplices. The forensic case against Mark continued to strengthen. Blood stains on his clothes matched Ellen's DNA, and fibers from the rope in his bag were discovered on her body. Investigators ruled out any prior connection between Mark and Ellen. There were no text messages, social media interactions, or mutual acquaintances. There was no evidence to suggest they had ever met. Investigators stated that it was a random attack, although questions remained as to why Ellen was targeted. Further investigation revealed that Mark had interacted with other women in the park that day, none of whom reported being harmed. By June 20th, Mark had been charged with murder and ordered to appear in court, while the other suspects were no longer the focus of the investigation. David, Dean, and Vicky faced lesser charges. As the investigation honed in on Mark, unanswered questions remained. Why had he chosen that day? What compelled a man with no prior history of violence to commit such an act? As police prepared for the trial, they visited Mark in prison, seeking answers. They mentioned that he had an incredible loss of memory when it came to the finer details. With growing evidence against him, Mark eventually confessed. He admitted to killing Ellen and recounted how he greeted her before dragging her off the path. He expressed regret for his actions but consistently denied having any abusive motivations. Ellen's boyfriend, Ryan, expressed his heartbreak online, stating that he would never understand why it had to be her and why it had to happen to them. Mark Buckley's trial began at Manchester Crown Court in September 2017. His guilty plea spared Ellen's family the anguish of enduring a lengthy trial. However, it left many questions unanswered about his motives, causing further pain and confusion. The prosecution, led by Peter Wright and Neil Fryman, presented compelling evidence to argue that the attack was premeditated and motivated by abuse. Fryman stated that Mark had been looking for someone to target that day, emphasizing that he had spent 9 hours in the park searching for a lone woman. The court learned that Mark, armed with a large knife, likely a kitchen knife, attacked Ellen around 2 p.m., dragging her into the bushes off a path. He inflicted multiple neck wounds and strangled her in what judge later described as a savage and brutal act. Prosecutors pointed to the rope and lubricant found in Mark's bag as evidence of his intent to carry out abuse. They believed the assault was never completed because he fled when disturbed. He even returned at 2 a.m. to attempt to bury Ellen's body, but his efforts were thwarted by a police helicopter equipped with heat-detecting technology. Mark's legal defense faced significant limitations following his guilty plea. Instead of challenging the evidence, they focused on presenting mitigating factors. They emphasized that Mark had no prior violent convictions, pointing out that his criminal record consisted only of arson, affray, and petty theft. They argued that the attack was an isolated incident rather than a pattern of recurring behavior. The defense highlighted Mark's remorse, evidenced by his early guilty plea, which, they claimed, demonstrated his acceptance of responsibility. They also noted Mark's limited recollection of the event but refrained from citing mental health issues, as no formal diagnosis had been provided. Their efforts were aimed at reducing his sentence, but the judge dismissed their arguments, stating that the guilty plea appeared to be more strategic than genuine. On September 14, 2017, Judge David Stockdale sentenced Mark Buckley to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years and 280 days before parole eligibility, meaning he would be 82 years old before being considered for release. The judge told Mark, who remained emotionless, that he had attacked Ellen in a savage and brutal manner. The judge stated that the victim, Ellen, would not have known that the attack was about to happen. He noted her small stature, her failed attempts to defend herself, and the injuries to her wrists. He also asserted that the attack was abusive in nature, citing evidence from items found in Mark's possession, and condemned his plans to bury Ellen. David Steele, 47, received a 2-year suspended sentence for obstructing justice and was ordered to complete unpaid community service. Vicky Calland and Dean Speakman were sentenced for destroying Ellen's belongings after learning about her murder. Dean received a 20-month jail sentence, while Vicky, a mother of 4, received a 16-month suspended sentence. Both wept in court during their sentencing. Initially, they claimed they believed Mark's story that the items he brought them belonged to a girl he had stolen from at a park bench. When they learned about Ellen's death and realized the items belonged to her, they panicked and burned the evidence to cover their tracks. Dean even returned to the scene the following day to ensure that Ellen's laptop was completely destroyed. In court, it was revealed that Dean had faced significant threats while in prison, requiring placement in protective custody, and Vicky had to move out of her home in Billingate due to hostile reactions from the community. Judge Stockdale considered the damage caused by the destruction of Ellen's laptop, noting that this had caused increased distress to her family and her boyfriend, Ryan. He explained that the loss of the laptop went beyond its monetary value. It contained invaluable memories, such as documents and photographs, that chronicled Ellen's life. Mariana Baza, a 19-year-old physiotherapy student, studied at a private university near her hometown of Bariri. Born in 2000, she was the only child of Ayrton and Marlene Forty, a couple devoted to their daughter. Her family described her as a bright, kind, and compassionate person, always full of smiles and warm words. Her love for physiotherapy went beyond just choosing a career. It reflected her caring personality and desire to help others heal and find relief from pain. Her parents were immensely proud of her dedication. At university, She was a hardworking student who managed to balance her studies with an active social life. She made friends easily, whether at school or at the gym where she worked out regularly. Mariana had been in a 3-year relationship with her boyfriend, Jefferson Viana. At 22, Jefferson was serving in the Brazilian Navy in São Paulo. The two had met in their late teens and built a strong relationship founded on mutual respect and shared aspirations. They were a loving couple, often sending each other playful messages and celebrating life's milestones together. On the morning of September 24, 2019, Mariana and Jefferson were exchanging their usual texts. While they faced challenges like any young couple, especially the distance caused by his Navy duties, they maintained their bond through calls and messages. There were no signs of any issues between them. They were happy and planning their future together. That morning, everything in Bariri seemed normal. Around 7 a.m., the sun was just beginning to rise, and Mariana was already starting her day. She was at the gym with her friend, Heloisa Passarello, fitting in an early workout to clear her mind and stay active. The gym was a familiar place for Mariana, where she often balanced exercise with catching up with friends. By 8 a.m., the workout was over. At 8:11 a.m., Mariana walked out of the gym, with Heloisa following a few steps behind. The street outside was quiet, lined with homes and a few parked cars. Mariana, carrying her phone, appeared to be checking notifications or organizing her thoughts about the day ahead, classes, assignments, and maybe a quick text to Jefferson. She was focused, with a busy schedule ahead. As she approaches the car, the camera catches her slowing down, her head tilted slightly as if noticing something unusual. At 8:12 a.m., she stopped at the front passenger side of her Volkswagen. Her tire was completely flat, so deflated it would be impossible to drive. Heloisa lingered near the gym entrance, watching Mariana by her car. Mariana looked more annoyed than worried. Surveillance footage showed her pulling out her phone, possibly deciding who to call for help, maybe her dad, her reliable go-to for car issues, or her cousin, who lived nearby. However, she didn't make a call, at least not right away. The street wasn't empty. The footage captured a man crossing from the opposite sidewalk toward Mariana's car. He was dressed casually in jeans and a plain shirt. However, the cameras couldn't clearly capture his face due to the distance and grainy quality of the feed. He approached Mariana directly, calm and purposeful, exuding a friendly demeanor as he offered to help with her flat tire. Mariana hesitated. She was not naive and was thinking whether to drive to her father's house or call someone she felt she could trust. However, the man was persistent. He warns her that driving on a flat tire could damage the wheel, making her believe that he truly cares about her. Around 8:15 a.m., Heloisa, Mariana's friend, had to leave for work. She got on her motorcycle and rode off. Meanwhile, the man continued speaking with Mariana, his gestures becoming more animated as he attempted to convince her. By 8:28 a.m., the situation shifted. Footage from the gym's cameras showed the man pointing across the street toward a small chakra, a rural property with a house and some land. He claimed he could properly fix the tire there and persuaded Mariana to follow him. Although hesitant and cautious, Mariana eventually agreed. At 8:29 a.m., she drove her Volkswagen across the street into the chakra's yard. Once she entered, the gate closed behind her, and her car disappeared from the camera's view. That was the last time Mariana was seen alive in public. The chakra's yard, hidden by walls and the closed gate, was a blind spot, outside the coverage of the gyms and nearby cameras. The street soon returned to its normal routine, unaware of the danger unfolding just out of sight. Before disappearing, Mariana had taken a picture of the man kneeling by her car and sent it to her boyfriend, Jefferson. Their conversation was lighthearted, typical of their 3-year relationship. Mariana didn't seem fearful when she sent the photo. Instead, she laughed about the situation. Jefferson didn't sense any danger either. By noon, Jefferson tried messaging Mariana again but got no response. Her phone, usually active with notifications, was completely silent. He called her, but the call went directly to voicemail. Later, he recalled noticing that her phone appeared to have no signal, a detail that would continue to haunt him. His concern grew as the hours passed. Mariana was supposed to attend her physiotherapy classes in Bauru, a 30-mile drive from her hometown of Bariri. She had never missed a class without notifying someone beforehand. By 2 p.m., Jefferson began contacting her friends to see if anyone had heard from her, but no one had. Growing increasingly worried, he reached out to her family, including her parents, Berton and Marlene, as well as her aunts and cousins, all of whom were very close to her and maintained regular contact. The family grew equally alarmed. Her father, Ayrton, repeatedly tried calling her, but her phone remained off. By 3 p.m., the family was convinced that something was seriously wrong. They contacted the Bariri police to report Mariana missing and emphasized the urgency of the situation. The police promptly filed a missing persons report and began gathering information from her close contacts. Jefferson was interviewed first. He shared the photo and text messages Mariana had sent him that morning. The photo, time-stamped around 8:30 a.m., showed a man crouched next to Mariana's Volkswagen, working on a tire. His face was partially visible, but the angle of the photo made it difficult to identify him. Jefferson told the police that everything had seemed normal. Mariana hadn't appeared uncomfortable, and the man looked like a helpful passerby. The police considered the photo an important lead, but more information was needed. They asked Jefferson if Mariana had any enemies or recent conflicts. He insisted that she was well-liked and had no issues in her personal life, adding that their relationship was happy and stable. His alibi was verified, as he was in Sao Paulo fulfilling his naval duties at the time. His colleagues confirmed his whereabouts. Investigators then spoke to one of Mariana's gym friends, Heloisa, who had been with her earlier that morning. Heloisa confirmed the timeline of the incident. Mariana had finished her workout around 8 a.m., and they chatted briefly before stepping outside together. It was then that Mariana noticed the flat tire on her car. A man approached and offered to help her. Heloisa did not recognize the man, but she described him as friendly and non-threatening in appearance. She recalled that Mariana was hesitant at first but eventually let him assist after he pointed out that driving on the flat tire could damage the wheel. She left around 8:15 a.m., assuming everything was fine. Later, when speaking to the police, she expressed deep guilt, wishing she had stayed with Mariana longer. Heloisa's description of the man was vague: average height, casual clothes. However, it matched the person in the photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson. When police asked Heloisa for more information, asking if she had noticed anyone else in the area or anything suspicious, she mentioned only a few people exercising and passers-by, but did not see anything unusual. The busy morning traffic made spotting anything unusual difficult. The police reviewed the gym's CCTV footage, which showed Mariana driving into a nearby property, referred to as the Chakra, at 8:29 a.m. They visited the location, which was owned by a local resident who had hired a handyman, Rodrigo Pereira Alves, to paint it. The owner confirmed that Rodrigo had been there that morning but said he had since disappeared. The officers inspected the area but found no signs of Mariana or her car. However, another surveillance tape revealed her Volkswagen being driven away an hour later. The footage showed the driver stepping out briefly, and their clothing made it clear the driver was not Mariana. The photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson became critical evidence. Police have secretly launched an investigation into the man in the photo without releasing his identity to avoid exposure. They discovered he had a criminal history, including serious offenses, which raised suspicions. The flat tire, possibly deliberately slashed, suggested a premeditated plan rather than a random event. The police initiated covert surveillance near the suspect's last known location while tracking Mariana's phone. Its last signal came from the gym's area and went offline around 8:36 a.m., likely turned off or destroyed. Knowing her car had been driven away, officers issued an alert to neighboring towns with details about the Volkswagen and the man in the photo, now their primary suspect. The car was last seen heading west toward Itapolis. In response, authorities expanded the search operation, deploying reinforcements, including a helicopter and additional officers. By 5 p.m., Word had already spread quickly throughout Bariri. Everyone was talking animatedly, texting, and trying to piece together the details of the event. They were tracking a car and following clues from a photo. Soon, a name surfaced: Rodrigo Pereira Alves. He was a career criminal with a long history of offenses, including robbery, kidnapping, extortion, and attempted robbery. He had served 12 years in prison and had been released just 30 days before Mariana's kidnapping. The photo Mariana had sent matched him, as did footage from nearby CCTV cameras. As the evening progressed, the search intensified. By 8 p.m., the effort was relentless, with helicopters in the air and patrol teams on the ground. At around 9 p.m., the search team located the Volkswagen abandoned in Itapolis, near a sugarcane plantation. The car was immediately secured, and forensic investigators began their work. The vehicle was found with its doors unlocked, keys missing, and interior in disarray. Evidence showed a violent struggle had taken place, with scratches on the dashboard, torn seatbelts, and severe damage to the interior of the car. Under the seat, police found a knife, though it wasn't believed to have been used in the crime. There was no blood, but the evidence made it clear something serious had taken place. After discovering the car, authorities intensified their pursuit of Rodrigo. He had grown up in a troubled home, dropped out of school early, and turned to crime as a teenager. Known as a loner, he worked sporadic jobs in construction and mechanics but had no stable employment. Few people in the community were even aware he was out of prison, as his return had gone unnoticed. Using cell phone tracking, the police discovered that he was hiding at a relative's house. Officers surrounded the area, but Rodrigo, realizing he was trapped, attempted to escape by climbing onto a nearby rooftop. After a tense standoff, he was captured. Disheveled and gaunt, he initially resisted and denied involvement, but the evidence against him, including Mariana's photo, surveillance footage, and tire tracks, was overwhelming. Eventually, he provided information on where Mariana could be found. The search for Mariana led investigators back to the sugarcane plantation where the car had been abandoned. Late the next morning, they made a devastating discovery. Mariana's body was found hidden about a mile from the car, concealed among the dense sugarcane stalks. She was gagged, blindfolded, and her hands were tied behind her back. The scene was heartbreaking. An autopsy performed revealed that her cause of death was strangulation. Her injuries were severe: bruises on her arms and legs, scratches on her face, and broken fingernails, all indicating she had fought desperately against her attacker. The autopsy also investigated the possibility of abuse, though the results remained inconclusive, as further testing was required. No stab wounds or gunshot injuries were found, ruling out the knife discovered in the car as a weapon. The coroner estimated that she had died within hours of her disappearance, likely between 8 a.m. and noon on September 24th. The presence of the bindings and gag indicated that she had been restrained before her death, suggesting a deliberate and brutal act. Rodrigo was charged with kidnapping, abuse, robbery, and murder as prosecutors built their case using physical evidence and his prior criminal record. The prosecution argued that he had used the pretense of offering help to gain Mariana's trust, overpowering her in the yard of the property. Investigators noted a clear pattern of impulsive and predatory behavior, consistent with his criminal past. But why was Rodrigo even in Bariri? It turned out he had obtained the job through a friend, claiming that it was part of a fresh start. Rodrigo admitted to luring Mariana to the chakra, stating that the incident happened on a whim. He claimed to have hitched a ride with her car after fixing her tire, then took her into his house and panicked when she tried to leave. However, investigators dismissed his claims of panic, labeling the act as cold and calculated. In early 2021, more than a year after Mariana was murdered on September 24, 2019, the trial of Rodrigo began at the Judicial Center near Bariri. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, locals, and media outlets, all focused on Rodrigo, a 39-year-old defendant who sat expressionless in the dock. The prosecution, led by experienced attorneys, aimed to prove that Rodrigo was a calculated predator. They presented critical evidence, including CCTV footage from the gym and a photo Mariana had sent to her boyfriend. The prosecution highlighted key points in their case. One piece of evidence was the flat tire on Mariana's car, believed to have been deliberately slashed, which, they argued, demonstrated premeditation. They painted Rodrigo as someone who targeted Mariana, manipulated her trust, and meticulously planned her abduction and murder. His criminal history became a focal point: 12 years in prison for kidnapping and attempted murder, having only recently been released before the crime occurred. The autopsy report was damning, describing strangulation, bruises, and defensive wounds that all suggested a violent struggle. The prosecution argued that Mariana was likely strangled with her own shirt during the attack. The defense faced a challenging case and employed strategies to cast doubt and downplay the prosecution's arguments. They highlighted gaps in the forensic evidence, emphasizing the absence of blood or DNA to conclusively prove abuse. They also claimed the knife found in the car could belong to anyone. Despite their efforts, it was clear the odds were against them. Mariana's family, including her parents, Berton and Marlene, as well as other relatives, attended all of the court proceedings, their grief evident on their faces. The prosecution called them as witnesses to testify about Mariana's character, portraying her vibrancy and the profound loss her death had caused. Marlene, her mother, described her daughter as their everything, highlighting that she was always smiling and always helping others. Jefferson, Mariana's boyfriend, also testified, tearfully recalling their last messages and the haunting photo she had sent him. He confessed emotionally to the court that he would never forgive himself for not realizing that she was in danger. The prosecution used the testimony to emphasize the manipulation and betrayal of trust that Rodrigo had committed against Mariana, a point that the jury had to consider. Another surveillance video captured Rodrigo leaning against Mariana's car before she left the gym, further supporting the claim that he had intentionally sabotaged her vehicle to trap her. Rodrigo's defense team did not contest his presence at the crime scene, that was undeniable. Instead, they focused on portraying him as mentally unstable, arguing that his 12 years in prison had left him impulsive and erratic, rather than a calculated killer. They did not deny the crime itself but tried to reduce its severity, aiming for a conviction of manslaughter rather than femicide to lessen his sentence. In March 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Rodrigo Pereira Alves was sentenced to 40 years, 10 months, and 18 days in prison. But the story didn't end there. Mariana's mother, Marlene, who had become a vocal advocate for preserving her daughter's memory, passed away in February 2022 at the age of 51. On September 23, 2024, just one day before the 5th anniversary of Mariana's murder, Rodrigo died from an unspecified illness in the intensive care unit of Botacata Hospital. While it was reported that he suffered from a chronic disease, details of his exact cause of death were not disclosed by the prison or the hospital. Stacy DeGrandchamp, a 17-year-old high school student from Fort Wayne, dreamed of attending Ball State University to pursue a career in computer technology. As an only child raised by a single mother, Stacy was described as confident, beautiful, and popular. However, her popularity often led to jealousy from others. On August 15, 2002, Stacy attended a party with approximately 20 people. Tragically, the night took a devastating turn when a fight broke out outside the house, leaving Stacy severely injured. She was rushed to the hospital but passed away shortly after. It took 17 years to solve the case, as witnesses were initially unwilling to come forward. In the spring of 2002, Stacy met Brandon Muff, a recent graduate of Fort Wayne High School, at a party. Brandon, who was in his early 20s, had a rebellious bad boy persona that Stacy found irresistible. She quickly fell for him and started spending time with his circle of friends. This group included girls Amanda Richards, Whitney McGee, and Holly Boisvert, who often hosted gatherings at Holly's house. Her home, which included a pool, became a popular hangout spot, as her father gave the teens free rein. While Stacy appeared to fit in with the group, her presence reignited old tensions between her and Holly. The conflict between Stacy and Holly traced back to middle school. At an 8th grade pool party at Holly's house, she had mocked and splashed Stacy in front of others, causing Stacy to leave the gathering embarrassed. Although the two seem to have made up over time, old grudges resurface when Stacy joins Holly's group of friends as Brandon's girlfriend. Holly had previously dated Brandon, and while their relationship had ended, she still had lingering feelings for him. Stacy's budding romance with Brandon upset Holly, leading to renewed friction. However, this time Stacy did not let herself be intimidated like before. By the summer of 2002, the tension between Stacy and Holly had escalated. Holly began spreading rumors about Stacy, turning others in the group against her. At the same time, Stacy's relationship with Brandon started to unravel. Realizing she was on the wrong path, Stacy made a pivotal decision just weeks before her senior year of high school. She broke up with Brandon, distanced herself from his crowd, and began focusing on her future. She cut ties with most of the group, apart from a new friend she had made that summer, Abby Oswald. Determined to turn her life around, Stacy began preparing for the college years ahead. Abby, a friend of Brandon, met Stacy through him. On August 15, 2002, they spent the day together. They decided to go to the mall, as Abby was shopping for a prom outfit. Later, Abby suggested they attend a party at Brandon's house, where he lived with his roommate, Justin. Stacy was hesitant at first, but Abby convinced her to go. Around 9:30 p.m., they arrived at the house. Shortly before 11 p.m., the Fort Wayne Police Department, along with firefighters and paramedics, responded to a 911 call from the Guthrie Street area. Earlier, in the early evening, the police were called due to complaints about loud music in a small party. However, they left without further intervention. This time, when emergency responders arrived, they found a young woman lying in the driveway, bleeding from her chest. She was rushed to a trauma center in Fort Wayne, but her injuries proved fatal. Abby later explained to detectives what had transpired. When she and Stacy arrived at the party, Brandon and a woman, Holly, were sitting together on the porch. Stacy confronted Holly, questioning her presence. The argument quickly escalated into a physical fight. They pulled each other's hair, punched, kicked, and rolled on the grass. At one point during the fight, Stacy gained the upper hand and kicked Holly in the head or face. Suddenly, Stacy appeared to lose strength and went limp. At that moment, Brandon intervened. He grabbed Stacy by her ankles and dragged her toward the trash cans. Once in the yard, she managed to stand up and stagger down the driveway, but only a few seconds later, she passed out. Brandon went to check on her, lifted her shirt, and noticed that her bra was soaked in blood. That was when they called 911. Both Holly and Brandon were taken to the police station for questioning. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and taped off the area. They began taking photos and videos of the crime scene. Since Stacy was bleeding from the chest, investigators suspected that a weapon had been used. However, no sharp objects or knives were found in the backyard or driveway. After obtaining a search warrant, detectives entered the house and seized several kitchen knives from the table. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors worked in the operating room to save Stacy's life. She had a stab wound to her upper chest and another to her abdomen. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. With her death ruled a homicide, the Fort Wayne police began an official investigation. At the station, Holly provided her version of events. She claimed she had no part in Stacy's injuries, stating that they had only argued and fought. Holly denied having a knife and suggested that Stacy might have fallen onto glass in the trash can. Brandon was also interviewed, and his blood-stained shirt was collected as evidence. He claimed he had pulled Stacy by her ankles to break up the fight but didn't realize how hard he had been pulling. He also suggested that she might have been injured by broken glass from the trash can. However, Holly and Brandon's statements didn't align with the evidence. Photos of the crime scene showed no broken glass in or around the trash cans. Moreover, there was no blood near them. The coroner's report confirmed that Stacy's injuries were caused by a sharp knife blade, as they were clearly stab wounds. Nevertheless, no knife was found at the scene or on Holly and Brandon at the time. They were then released, but the investigation into Stacy's death remained ongoing. On August 19, 2002, Stacy was laid to rest, dressed in the outfit she had planned to wear for her prom photo. Her funeral was crowded, with many of her friends from parties attending: Abby, Whitney, and Amanda. Notably absent was Holly, but Brandon attended, drawing everyone's attention. His presence surprised many, as rumors were swirling at Wayne High School that he and his friends had manipulated Stacy into attending the party where Holly could confront her. This raised suspicions among investigators about whether the incident was a premeditated plot by Holly to harm Stacy. Following Stacy's death, Holly became a social outcast as most people believed she was responsible. However, another rumor implicated Whitney. A few days before Stacy's death, Whitney had left a message on Stacy's answering machine, advising her to be careful. When a detective questioned Whitney about the message, she insisted it wasn't a threat but rather a warning. Whitney claimed she knew Holly wanted to pick a fight with Stacy and hoped to prevent the two from encountering each other. While Whitney may have been trying to keep Stacy and Holly apart, Brandon seemed to do the opposite. Whitney revealed to detectives that Brandon had called Holly on August 15th and pressured her to attend the party, warning her that if she didn't come, he would never speak to her again. Investigators began considering whether he had orchestrated the situation to provoke a confrontation between Holly and Stacy. She had just broken up with Brandon, which had hurt his self-esteem. Detectives speculate that revenge, combined with Holly's jealousy, may have led to Stacy's death. Abby, Stacy's new friend, played a significant role in convincing her to attend the party. Abby encouraged Stacy to go because she was friends with Brandon. Investigators later questioned Abby's motives, wondering why she would push Stacy to attend the party at the Guthrie Street house when Holly might be there. They suspected that she could have been involved in a plan to put Stacy in harm's way. However, Abby denied any involvement and claimed that she had actually tried to stop the fight that occurred that night. The investigation eventually shifted its focus to Brandon, leading detectives to speak with his roommate, Justin. On August 26, Justin was interviewed by law enforcement and became a key witness. He stated that when he had tried to break up the fight between Stacy and Holly, Brandon had stopped him and told him to let them fight, as if Brandon had been enjoying the confrontation. He also revealed that Brandon later asked him to tell the police that Holly hadn't done anything and that Stacy had simply fallen. This statement made detectives extremely suspicious. They believed Brandon might know important details but was either too scared to share them or deliberately trying to hinder their investigation. Brandon was questioned again, but during his second interview, he refused to provide any new information. He claimed he wasn't a snitch and denied seeing Holly with a knife. Detectives were convinced that Holly was responsible for the crime, but no witnesses were willing to admit they had seen anything, and no murder weapon was ever found. Without these crucial pieces of evidence, the authorities were unable to charge or arrest anyone. As time passed, weeks, months, and eventually years, the case went cold. 17 years after Stacy's death, no one had been held accountable, and no progress had been made in solving the case. It remained unsolved, leaving everyone involved frustrated and confused. Stacy's cousin, Jamie McMillan, refused to let the case fade into obscurity. Determined to find justice, Jamie reached out to Detective Brian Martin, who specialized in unsolved cases. In March 2019, Jamie urged Detective Martin to revisit the case. She suggested interviewing Brandon, Holly, Abby, and Amanda again, hoping that, with the passage of time, the witnesses might be more willing to talk and share the truth. Everyone who had attended the party that night was now older, and perhaps they had reflected on their lives and would finally provide new information that could advance the investigation. Detective Martin begins questioning Abby, who continues to deny ever seeing the knife, just as she did 17 years ago. Next, he interviewed Brandon, who appeared deeply remorseful and admitted the incident had weighed on him for years. However, Brandon also stated that he couldn't recall seeing Holly with a knife. About a month later, Detective Martin located Holly in Wisconsin. Holly was initially hesitant to open the door, but when she eventually did, Detective Martin introduced himself and explained that he was investigating an unsolved case. Holly turned visibly pale. When the detective asked whether she remembered the party, their conversation quickly revealed some surprising details. During their discussion, Holly repeatedly referred to Stacy as her friend. Holly admitted they had been difficult teenage girls, but Stacy was still her friend. She firmly stated that she would never intentionally harm Stacy or threaten Stacy with a knife. She then admitted that she had owned a folding knife at the time and usually carried it for protection. When the detective asked if she had the knife with her during the fight with Stacy, Holly left the room and returned with the very same knife in hand. Detective Martin was shocked. He believed it could potentially be the weapon that had eluded investigators for 17 years. Back in Fort Wayne, Detective Martin began gathering additional information. Although initial test results showed that Stacy's DNA was not found on Holly's knife, the detective conducted further analysis. He later consulted Dr. Wagner, the chief pathologist on the case, who reviewed Stacy's autopsy photos. Wagner concluded that the knife was consistent with the stab wounds Stacy had suffered. On March 25, 2020, Holly, who was now 33 years old, was arrested. After years of silence, Amanda, a friend and the main witness, finally decided to speak up. She had been with Holly the night of the party and revealed that Holly had a knife with her that evening. She recalled Holly bringing the knife along when they arrived at the house and asking Amanda to hold it in her purse. Later, as she and another friend, Whitney, were preparing to leave, Holly asked for the knife back. Amanda saw nothing unusual about this and handed it over. As Amanda and Whitney were leaving, Stacy arrived at the house. Although Amanda remained silent for nearly 2 decades, her testimony could have helped the police solve the case much sooner. With Amanda's statement and additional evidence, authorities were able to reconstruct the incident leading up to Stacy's death. At the center of this tragic story was Brandon, a former graduate of Fort Wayne High School. He was the quintessential bad boy and, despite his flaws, attracted Stacy. Their relationship marked a turning point in Stacy's life, as she became involved with Brandon's social circle, a group known for their partying. Holly, who had dated Brandon before Stacy, still harbored feelings for him. Her lingering affection, coupled with Brandon's manipulative tendencies, deepened her resentment toward Stacy. He enjoyed the attention and often fostered rivalry between Holly and Stacy, which fueled his ego. This animosity came to a head on August 15, 2002. Stacy had received an invitation to a party despite her friends' concerns about its location. She chose to attend anyway. When she arrived, she found Holly with Brandon, further escalating the tension. An argument broke out and quickly turned violent. When Holly realized she was losing the fight, she stabbed Stacy twice with the knife. After years of investigation and consultation with Stacy's family, the Allen County Circuit Court offered Holly a plea bargain. She confessed to stabbing Stacy, which caused Stacy's death, and insisted that neither Brandon nor anyone else was involved. She acted alone. On January 14, 2022, Holly Boisvert was sentenced to 25 years in prison as part of the plea agreement, with 5 years suspended and 3 years of probation. Accounting for the time she has already served in credits for good behavior, she could be released as early as 2030. Lucy Li was born in 1995 in Shenzhen, one of China's largest economic centers. She is the oldest of 3 triplet sisters, born just minutes apart. In search of a better life, her parents decided to leave China and move to Canada, leaving their young daughters in the care of relatives. The family would not reunite for 7 years until the girls were finally brought to Toronto. Lucy's father, a determined and business-minded individual, opened a driving school to help immigrants obtain their licenses. However, the family's main financial success came from her mother, Winnie, who founded a financial firm called Respond International. Winnie quickly became well known for her ability to navigate tax regulations and manage investments effectively, earning a strong reputation in the finance industry. Her influence was so significant that she was featured in business magazines, and her picture appeared alongside leading Canadian politicians. However, this path to success came with many sacrifices, especially in family relationships. Winnie was often absent from her daughters' lives, and when she was present, it was mainly to oversee their achievements. She expected perfection in all areas: academics, sports, and the arts. The 3 sisters were required to be fluent in multiple languages, play musical instruments, understand finance, and excel in academic competitions. Any mistakes were unacceptable. Lucy tried hard to meet these high expectations, but she quickly felt that her accomplishments were undervalued. Her mother never celebrated her successes, viewing them as merely the minimum standard. As a result, Lucy began to feel like an outsider in her own family. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in a small town in Slovakia, Oliver Carafa was born. His family was not wealthy, but his parents were determined to provide him with a good education and the opportunity to build a successful future. When he was 8, his family moved to Canada in search of better opportunities. Unlike Lucy, his childhood didn't have many rules. He grew up with a sense of freedom and independence, but as a teenager he began to go down the wrong path. He was attracted to risky behaviors and sought the excitement of pushing limits, showing little interest in school and viewing discipline as irrelevant. Oliver and Lucy's paths crossed when they both attended the same school. Lucy was a model student, while Oliver frequently broke the rules. Despite their differences, they became friends. Oliver does not like to follow the wishes of others, which intrigues Lucy. He is the first person to see her not just through her list of achievements. Over time, their friendship developed into romance. This was Lucy's first relationship that wasn't influenced by family expectations or pressure. However, like many teenage relationships, it didn't last. They soon realized that they and their visions of the future were not the same. After high school, they went their separate ways. Lucy followed her mother's plan and enrolled in a finance program at a prestigious university, preparing for a career in the family business. Oliver, on the other hand, pursued a reckless lifestyle, driven by a love for risk and the allure of quick money. At 19, he drove under the influence and crashed into a streetlight, resulting in one death and serious injuries to another passenger. Although he suffered only minor injuries, his life was changed forever. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison and banned from driving for 15 years. Years later, fate brought him and Lucy together again, but this time, their reunion was no longer an innocent teenage romance. Instead, they will face secrets, crimes, and a life that is more complicated than it seems. Lucy attended one of Canada's top universities, majoring in finance and global business, though the decision was never truly hers. Her mother had determined the fields her daughters would study, ensuring that they would occupy important positions in the family business. Lucy realized that her education was not about self-discovery, but rather part of a plan she had never chosen. Throughout her college years, she was closely monitored and expected to excel. Graduating wasn't sufficient, she had to do so with top honors. Any mistake was perceived as a failure, and even the smallest divergence from the plan would result in her mother's disappointment. Lucy constantly strives, achieving many academic awards, interning at prestigious companies and building an excellent resume. Immediately after graduating, she was brought into the family business. Her mother, Winnie, expected her to take over the financial operations and eventually lead the company. To most people, this might seem like a clear path to success, but to Lucy, it feels like she's stuck in a life her mother has planned out for her. While Lucy was engulfed in strict discipline and career demands, Oliver was serving his time and building connections. Among his fellow inmates were people involved in illegal activities, including car theft and various scams. They recognized Oliver's appetite for risk and ambition, and taught him tactics for circumventing the law. These lessons helped him start his business in the shadows. In 2019, after 5 years in prison, Oliver was released. However, adjusting to life outside was more challenging than he had anticipated. Lacking formal education and legitimate work experience, he struggled to find well-paying legal jobs. Additionally, a driving ban limited his freedom. During this time, he sought a new direction and briefly explored modeling, using his looks to earn some money. He landed a few roles in small advertising campaigns, which didn't pay much but helped him cultivate an image of success. It was then that he decided to reconnect with Lucy. They hadn't seen each other in years. Back in school, she was an energetic student with a bright future, but now she is very different. Her social media is filled with images from lavish parties, exciting trips, and meals at upscale restaurants. She has become a famous person, followed by many and frequently collaborating with brands. Oliver reached out to her. Their conversation begins with memories of the past and quickly moves to their present lives. Lucy revealed that although she had met all of her mother's expectations, she was not happy. Her success felt dictated by others rather than herself. Oliver, on the other hand, described his struggles and his desire for a new beginning. A few days later, they met at a restaurant, where they discussed how much they had transformed. Oliver exuded confidence as he spoke of new prospects, and Lucy listened, captivated by his sense of freedom. Unlike her, he wasn't restricted by corporate constraints or family pressures. He was living life on his own terms. Just weeks after reconnecting, Lucy made an unexpected decision. She packed her things and moved in with Oliver, cutting ties with her old life and abandoning the future plans her mother had worked so hard to build. She chose an uncertain path instead of a clear path. At that time, she did not foresee that this choice would not bring freedom, but lead to great trouble. Lucy leaving shocked her mother, Winnie. Known for her strict rules, Winnie expected her daughters to obey. When she learned that Lucy was with Oliver, a man with a criminal history, her response was immediate and harsh. Lucy's bank accounts were frozen overnight, and all financial support was withdrawn. Instead of turning back, this only fueled Lucy's determination to prove she could manage without her mother's assistance. However, Lucy soon realized her independence was a facade. Within weeks, it became evident that her career as an influencer was not providing enough income. Accustomed to a lavish lifestyle, she found herself relying entirely on Oliver for financial stability. He seemed unconcerned, confidently assuring her that he had several income sources and that she didn't need to worry. Oliver claimed his money came from investments, flipping cars, rare items, and other profitable ventures. Lucy didn't question him, she wanted to believe life could be that simple. Lucy gradually became more involved in Oliver's business. Since he was banned from driving due to past legal issues, she took on the role of his full-time driver. At first, driving him to meetings and picking people up seemed unimportant, and she often waited in the car while he conducted business. However, she soon noticed that their routes were consistently different and that most trips occurred late at night. When Oliver first asked Lucy to sign documents in her name, she felt uneasy. The paperwork was connected to vehicles she had never seen, but he assured her that it was just a normal part of his business in exporting and reselling cars to high-end clients. He insisted everything was legal, though it required some workaround methods. Trusting him, she signed the documents, managed accounts, and assisted with transactions, believing she was merely helping with business operations. In reality, she was already entangled in a criminal enterprise, with Oliver using her identity to create a facade of legitimacy for his dealings. Despite having unstable finances, they lived in luxury. Their apartment was in a wealthy part of Toronto, they frequently changed cars and never questioned restaurant prices. Designer clothes, jewelry, and lavish vacations became their new reality. Lucy did not realize that she was becoming increasingly dependent on Oliver, not just for money but for her entire lifestyle. He convinced her that they were a team and that without him, she could not maintain this way of living. Unbeknownst to her, she was already on the brink of a major crisis. In the spring of 2020, Oliver had a chance to elevate his business. Through mutual acquaintances, he came to know Tyler Pratt, who seemed to be a successful entrepreneur. Tyler owned various companies, including those in dietary supplements and investments, but his real income came from illegal activities. He was deeply involved in the trade of banned substances in Canada, managing both imports and distribution. After his divorce, Tyler sought new investment opportunities and aimed to legitimize some of his assets, gradually stepping away from the underground economy. He needed a trustworthy partner with a promising business idea, and Oliver seemed perfect, young, ambitious, well-connected, and confident. Oliver arranged a dinner to present himself as an expert in logistics and international trade. He confidently discussed various lucrative opportunities, including automobile imports and real estate, but his main focus was on a new idea: supplying personal protective equipment, PPE. Amid the chaos, the demand for masks, protective suits, gloves, and other essential supplies was unprecedented. Oliver proposed a project that he believed could earn millions by sourcing PPE from Asia and selling it at higher prices in Western markets. With demand surging and suppliers eager for cash transactions, the plan seemed promising. Tyler was intrigued by the idea. Although experienced in business, he lacked knowledge of the legal market. Oliver reassures Tyler that he can handle the deals through his connections. Swayed by this assurance, Tyler invested $200,000, hoping for a quick profit, perhaps even doubling or tripling his investment. Over the next few weeks, Oliver maintained a facade of success. He provided Tyler with fake purchase reports, forged contracts from supposed legitimate suppliers, and banking documents that suggested successful transactions. Tyler believed his investment was safe and profitable. A month later, Oliver claimed that the project required more funding and insisted on an additional investment. He noted the growing demand, presenting it as an opportunity for even greater profits. Excited, Tyler invested another $500,000. Shortly after this second investment, Tyler began to notice concerning signs. Despite his money being transferred, shipments of PPE were not arriving. Oliver continued to assure him that everything was fine, but Oliver's excuses, logistical delays, customs issues, and bureaucratic red tape became increasingly unbelievable. Tyler wasn't gullible. He understood how business operated and refused to let his money simply disappear. As he increasingly demanded proof of the shipments, Oliver realized he was losing control. Panic set in when Tyler requested tangible evidence, but Oliver had none to provide. Desperate for a solution, Oliver asked Lucy for help, proposing that they delay Tyler to gain some extra time. Their only idea was to commit check fraud. Lucy finds an old check in her mother's business records and attempts to withdraw over $1 million from her mother's account, hoping that the transaction will go undetected. However, the bank flags the transaction when a manager, who knows her mother, notices that her mother's signature is fake and asks for verification. As a result, the transaction is blocked. Lucy and Oliver's plan had failed, and they were now cornered. Tyler no longer trusted their explanations and issued an ultimatum. He wanted his money back, or there would be serious consequences. Realizing they were in a dire situation, Oliver concluded that the only way to resolve the issue was to eliminate Tyler. He discussed this with Lucy, who felt conflicted. While she recognized the gravity of their predicament, committing a crime felt like going too far. Nevertheless, Oliver argued that they had no other option. Tyler wouldn't forgive betrayal, and their safety could be at stake. The plan came together quickly. They invited Tyler and his girlfriend, Jordan Romano, to a meeting under the guise of discussing a new business opportunity. Oliver claimed he had found a way to recover the lost funds. Although skeptical, Tyler agreed to meet one last time on February 28, 2021, around 6 p.m. When Tyler and Jordan arrived at the warehouse location, they were unaware it was a trap. Oliver had carefully prepared for this. He bought a used car with cash to leave no trace and obtained a disposable phone to communicate with Tyler. To further disguise herself, Lucy wore a wig to change her appearance. As soon as Tyler got out of the car, Oliver brandished a weapon. His first shots were directed at Jordan. He knew that eliminating a witness would alter the course of any future investigation. The bullet hit her in the chest, and she fell, unconscious. Tyler froze, realizing this was the end. Oliver didn't give him a chance to react. Oliver aimed the weapon at Tyler and fired without hesitation. Several shots were fired, and Tyler collapsed, instantly losing consciousness. Lucy stood nearby, aware of the situation but not intervening, knowing there was no turning back. In that moment, their lives shifted forever. They were no longer just con artists. They had become involved in something far more serious. Oliver quickly checked on Jordan to confirm that she had stopped breathing. After determining that she no longer showed any signs of life, he left her body next to Tyler's car and instructed Lucy to leave, believing they had eliminated all witnesses. They believed they had successfully concealed their crime. However, an unexpected incident occurred within an hour. Around 7:20 p.m., a truck driver passing by spotted someone lying near the entrance of the warehouse. It was Jordan. Despite her injuries, she was still alive and had managed to move just enough to attract the driver's attention. The man immediately called for emergency help. When paramedics arrived, they found that Jordan was still breathing. Although she was unconscious, her pulse was steady. No one knew how long she had been lying on the cold concrete floor, but it was evident that she had miraculously survived. She was rushed to the hospital, where surgeons performed emergency procedures to save her life. Meanwhile, law enforcement arrived to investigate the warehouse and discovered Tyler's body. He had died instantly from multiple gunshot wounds. There were no security cameras and no immediate witnesses, but Jordan was the key to solving the case. As Jordan fought for her life, detectives began their investigation. Detectives thoroughly examined Jordan's call logs, messages, and recent activities. Within hours, they discovered that she and Tyler had contacted Oliver before the attack. This meeting was not a coincidence. It had been orchestrated by Oliver, now their main suspect. Meanwhile, Oliver and Lucy are unaware that their plan has failed. As they watched the news and heard reports about an unknown attacker, they felt confident that everything had gone as planned. However, their confidence turned to fear when the anchor announced that one of the victims had survived and was in stable condition. Lucy became paralyzed with fear, while Oliver began pacing the room, realizing that Jordan had seen their faces, heard their voices, and could identify them once she woke up. The police would have a detailed description of the assailants. With their situation becoming dire, their only option was to flee. Oliver contacted associates who could provide fake passports and arrange their escape. They had enough money stashed from Tyler's theft. Their main concern was time. Within hours, they met with people who helped them secure new identities. Lucy received a fake passport as a Philippine citizen, while Oliver took on the identity of a Hungarian national. These papers allowed them to board a plane to Europe without arousing suspicion. Their first destination was Prague, chosen for its status as a busy transit hub filled with tourists and subject to fewer checks. They rented a short-term apartment, hoping to stay hidden while they planned their next moves. The first few days passed without incident as they avoided drawing attention and only went out when necessary. However, fear lingered. Oliver frequently checked the news, anxious about the moment when their names might appear on an international wanted list. Lucy was largely silent, struggling with the feeling that they were no longer just scammers. They had crossed a line and there was no turning back. A few days later, they moved to Bratislava and then to Budapest, thinking that by constantly changing locations they would avoid being pursued. In reality, however, they simply left a clearer trail for the authorities. Their false sense of security was short-lived. Oliver mistakenly believed that the police wouldn't find them quickly, but within weeks, the scenario changed. International law enforcement agencies became involved, tightening the net. Unbeknownst to Oliver and Lucy, their capture was inevitable. While they tried to vanish in Europe, Canadian authorities remained relentless in their investigation. The investigation made significant progress by analyzing phone records. Detectives traced a SIM card purchased just one day before the crime at a store in Toronto, which had been used to contact Tyler. Upon further investigation, they discovered that one of Lucy's friends had inadvertently provided her with a spare SIM card. During questioning, the friend disclosed that Lucy had requested it, providing the first solid evidence against her. The next breakthrough came from reviewing security footage. Investigators found recordings from the area near the warehouse showing a vehicle with fake identification passing by just hours before the attack. The people in the car closely resembled Oliver and Lucy. Additionally, cameras near their apartment captured them leaving on the evening of February 28 and returning late that night, reinforcing police suspicions. After Jordan regained consciousness, she confirmed the identities of the attackers as Lucy and Oliver. This confirmation led authorities to issue arrest warrants. Canadian law enforcement quickly shared the case details with Interpol, and within days, Oliver and Lucy were added to an international wanted list, with their descriptions, photographs, and last known locations sent to law enforcement agencies in Europe. Meanwhile, Lucy and Oliver were on the run but not unnoticed. Hungarian authorities were alerted and began watching for foreign travelers resembling their descriptions. Ultimately, Oliver made a critical mistake by using fake documents to pay rent for their apartment, raising suspicions. The landlord reported the suspicious tenants, and after verifying their identities as fugitives on the Interpol list, a special task force was sent to arrest them. They were arrested immediately, and although Lucy attempted to argue that it was a misunderstanding, the officers were fully aware of who they were taking into custody. Within hours, they were taken to a detention center, and extradition procedures to Canada began. Their time on the run was over, and now they had to face justice. By spring 2024, the trial of Lucy and Oliver gained nationwide attention. It became one of the most discussed cases in Canada, two young people who had numerous opportunities for success but instead chose a life of crime that ended in a deadly act. The trial lasted several weeks. Prosecutors presented a strong case with overwhelming evidence linking Lucy and Oliver to the crimes against Tyler and Jordan. This included call records, surveillance videos, financial transactions, and, most importantly, the testimony of a surviving witness, Jordan. Lucy's main defense was to blame Oliver. She claimed that she was not involved in planning the crime, was unaware of Tyler's fate, and was merely a victim of manipulation. She argued that Oliver was in control and that she had simply followed him without fully understanding the seriousness of their actions. However, the evidence told a different story. Prosecutors showed that Lucy had actively participated in financial schemes, helped hide stolen money, arranged the meeting with Tyler, and even tried to forge financial documents. Her choice to flee and use a fake passport only strengthened the prosecution's case. Oliver, on the other hand, did not testify. His defense team argued that the crime was not planned, but rather a consequence of a conflict. However, the court rejected this argument. At this point, the final piece of evidence from the security footage showed that Lucy had deliberately concealed her face during the meeting with Tyler. In addition, records showed that she had purchased a SIM card to lure him into a trap. This evidence completely undermined her version of the story. The verdict was severe but anticipated. Oliver Carafa and Lucy Lee were found guilty of the crimes of fraud and evading justice. Both were sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. The trial had concluded, but its effects continued to resonate. Lucy, who once lived a life of luxury, is now in prison. Oliver, who was always looking for adventure, has lost his freedom forever. Their story becomes a lesson in how greed and the desire to get rich quick can lead to disaster. After the trial, there were mixed opinions from the public. Some viewed Tyler Pratt as a victim, a man who misplaced his trust and ultimately suffered for it. His family and friends defended him, stating that he was attempting to move beyond his past and enter the legitimate business world. Others argued that he had a hand in his own downfall. He was aware of the risks and willingly engaged in questionable financial dealings. Lucy Lee became a symbol of untapped opportunities. Born into privilege, she had every chance to live comfortably without resorting to crime, yet she chose a different path that drew her away from her mother and into financial fraud, culminating in serious crime. After her arrest, her mother, Winnie, chose not to make any public comments. Although her reputation in the business world was affected, she chose to remain silent rather than seek media attention. Over time, she distanced herself almost completely from Lucy, providing no support or defense. Conversely, many regarded Oliver as a criminal whose fate was predetermined. His troubled history and reckless decisions had put him on this path long before the crime occurred, so his conviction did not surprise most people. The case resulted in multiple lives being shattered. Tyler lost his future, and Jordan not only lost her spouse but was also left devastated, as she was pregnant at the time of the incident. In the aftermath, Jordan lost her unborn child, which added to the tragedy. It started with the intention of making easy money, but it turned into a complete disaster. In the end, everyone involved paid a heavy toll through lost lives, lost freedom, or lost fortunes.
On the morning of July 4th, 2011, the body of a woman was found 5 miles outside of Wayland, Massachusetts. A cyclist, who was enjoying the scenery near a swampy area, noticed something unusual and decided to investigate. To her shock, she discovered the lifeless body of a young girl lying in the grass and mud. It was clear that the girl had not drowned. Instead, she had suffered a brutal fate. There was a noticeable wound on her neck, and a bungee cord was entangled in her hair. The bystander, however, still in shock, called emergency services to report what she witnessed. When law enforcement arrived, they pulled the body out of the water and examined it before sending it for forensic analysis. Since the girl had only been in the water for a short time, her appearance had not changed much. Officers identified her as 18-year-old Lauren Astley, who had been reported missing the night before. Lauren did not come home or attend a meeting with her friends. CCTV footage showed her entering the shopping center, where she worked as a sales clerk at Tenamanan, on July 3rd and leaving at 6:51 p.m. after her shift ended. At that time, she was on the phone with someone. Sadly, this was the last confirmed sighting of her, and she has not been heard from since. Malcolm Astley, Lauren's father, started to feel anxious because his daughter was always punctual and reliable. If she said she would be home at a specific time, she always did. She never changed her plans without a reason, and usually, she would inform him if she was going to be late. Understanding that something might have gone wrong, Malcolm quickly alerted the police about her disappearance. The police quickly began the search for Lauren. At the same time, her family and friends joined in to look for her. News of her disappearance spread rapidly through word of mouth among their acquaintances. Eventually, her car was discovered in a local beach parking lot. The windows were down, and her personal belongings, including a purse and a laptop, were left inside the car. However, Lauren was still missing, and it was uncertain where she might have gone after abandoning her vehicle in that condition. When Malcolm learned that his daughter's car had been found, he quickly drove to the location to search for her. He walked along the shoreline, using a flashlight to scan the water as if he might find her there. Soon after, Lauren's friends arrived, choosing to stay overnight at the site in hopes of being the first to see her. They spent the entire night searching the area, wondering where Lauren could have gone. It was hard for them to believe that the person they had been talking and laughing with just moments ago could simply vanish. Tragically, just 12 hours later, Lauren's body was discovered. The first person the officers contacted was her father. They shared the devastating news with him and asked him to come for identification. Malcolm struggled to accept that the girl on the pathologist's table was his daughter. However, once he composed himself, he officially recognized her. Before him lay his young and vibrant daughter, who had so much potential ahead of her. Heartbroken, he faced the painful reality and knew he had two important tasks: to inform his ex-wife about the tragedy and to find the person responsible for his daughter's death. When the devastating news reached the city, people were in disbelief. Friends and family collectively asserted that Lauren had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. The only person that some began to suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Nathaniel Fujita. His name was mentioned cautiously, as everyone recognized his deep love for Lauren and believed he could never harm her. Nevertheless, the investigations proceeded. Lauren and Nathaniel were the envy of their entire high school. She was a petite, pretty brown girl who stood out for her energy and uniqueness, and he was a tall, ambitious soccer player adored by many girls. Although the two had known each other since childhood, they revealed their feelings later on. Their relationship began in high school and lasted 3 years. It was a colorful romance with all the typical ups and downs. They fought and made up, broke up and got back together. Both had strong personalities, but they tried to cherish the bond that existed between them. At least, this was true for the first few years of their relationship. Lauren Astley was born in 1993 in Boston. She was the only child of Mary and Malcolm, which meant that both parents focused all their attention on her. Since they both worked as teachers, they instilled important values in her from an early age, the most significant being their desire for their daughter to grow up to be a good person. When Lauren was 6 years old, her parents divorced. However, this did not affect her upbringing. Both continued to care for her and support her in all their endeavors. Lauren was a remarkable young woman, constantly engaged in various activities that kept her busy. She was passionate about tennis and soccer, sang in a musical group, and was a member of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. Additionally, she took part in her church choir, worked as a counselor at a children's camp. No school or town concert was complete without her involvement, and many were amazed by her irrepressible energy. She was active, everywhere at once. Another aspect of Lauren's hobbies was her social activism. At the age of 12, she helped the victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Louisiana, and returned to the area 2 more times for similar missions. With her big, kind heart, open to the world and people, she cared for others more than she cared for herself. Those around her knew they could rely on her anytime for help or advice. Nathaniel attended high school with Lauren. He was a standout player on the school soccer team and showed great potential, dreaming of a future in sports. He was known as a diligent student and the life of the party. the eldest son of Beth and Toma Fujita. His family enjoyed prosperity and some fame in certain circles. His father was a renowned guitarist and a professor at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and was known for his unconventional approach to life. Interestingly, Nathaniel and Lauren developed a romantic relationship after she interviewed Nathaniel's father for a school project. After that, she began visiting their home more often, and once they stopped hiding their feelings, their parents began to communicate, visit each other. In the beginning, the first 2 years of Nathaniel and Lauren's relationship were wonderful. They were both attractive and their bond attracted a lot of attention. They enjoyed many activities together, going out, playing sports, studying, and more. However, over time, their closeness started to become overwhelming. Nathaniel grew more controlling, refusing to let Lauren go out by herself and becoming jealous over small things. He often imagined threats that didn't exist and wanted all of her attention for himself, leading to frequent arguments. Despite these issues, Lauren never reported any physical abuse. Instead, their relationship turned into an emotional roller coaster. Losing its sense of peace, this instability was uncomfortable for them both. Yet they struggled to regain the happy feelings they once had. As Lauren neared the end of her schooling, she started to consider her future. She made a list of the strengths and weaknesses of her relationship with Nathaniel and realized it was time to part ways. His behavior around her had changed, and her mother had unintentionally influenced her perception of their relationship, projecting her own ideas about a future with Nathaniel onto Lauren. Additionally, the upcoming college enrollment weighed heavily on her decision. Their paths were already separating. Lauren was applying to Elon University in North Carolina, while Nathaniel had received an invitation to play soccer at Trinity College in Connecticut. On April 1st, 2011, which was also her birthday, Lauren made a significant decision. She believed it was the right time to embrace changes and begin anew, as everyone had new relationships and activities to occupy their minds and help alleviate sadness. However, Nathaniel did not feel the same way. He experienced profound feelings of loss and loneliness. His enthusiasm for college had faded. He no longer engaged in practicing or socializing. Instead, he spent his days lying on the couch watching TV. Nathaniel slipped into a deep depression that became overwhelming for him. Everyone noticed that the once active, energetic young man had become withdrawn and depressed. He turned to alcohol and marijuana to escape his reality. It was difficult for Lauren to witness this change and to feel responsible for it. She sought advice from her friends on how to help him, but they all suggested that she should not interfere and instead give him the space to heal alone. They warned that her involvement could be seen as an attempt to fix him, which might make things worse. After graduation, Ashley's kindness and eagerness to help led to unexpected trouble. She and her friends organized a large party for about 150 people, held under a vast dome where everyone danced and had a good time. Nathaniel was among the guests, but he arrived quite drunk. When he saw Lauren dancing in the center of the dance floor, he attempted to talk to her. She politely asked him to leave her alone so he wouldn't ruin the party, explaining that they had already discussed everything before and that she didn't want to engage with him in his current state. Despite her request, he insisted on starting over the conversation. As time went on, Nathaniel's mood worsened, and he grew increasingly aggressive. Eventually, in a fit of anger, he punched a pole supporting the structure, causing it to shake and collapse, which ruined the celebration. The crowd was upset, wanted Nathaniel to leave the party. Later, Lauren approached her mother, crying and revealing that her ex-boyfriend would not leave her alone and was following her everywhere. She explained that at the graduation event, he prevented anyone from dancing with her and acted very badly. He was upset that she was happy without him. When the police learned that Lauren was missing, they immediately began questioning everyone close to her. All evidence pointed to Nathaniel, as he seemed to be the only one with a motive to hurt her. However, his friends all insisted that he was innocent. The officers had encountered previous cases where crimes were committed by unexpected individuals. Nathaniel and his mother met the detectives at their front door. During the discussion, Nathaniel appeared confused and upset about the sudden disappearance of someone he cared about. He shared that he had seen her recently around 7 p.m. when she stopped to talk to him in her car. Their conversation was pleasant but short, lasting no more than 5 minutes. He claimed that he was at home when Lauren disappeared and did not leave, but his alibi was hard to confirm since he was alone. His mother supported his story, mentioning that she had also seen Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend that day when Lauren visited the mall where she worked part-time. The mother was concerned about Nathaniel's well-being, which is why she had asked Lauren to speak with him. Nathaniel's parents had already consulted a psychiatrist, but the therapy sessions were unhelpful. Their son had become completely apathetic, merely going through the motions of life. His mother hoped that Lauren's words would inspire him, or at least help him regain some pride so he could move forward. This request made things more complicated for Lauren, but the meeting was supposed to be brief, and so it remained under the radar. After her meeting with Nathaniel's mother, Lauren had a phone conversation with Nathaniel, which was captured by the mall's security cameras. Concerned about her ex-boyfriend, she reached out to him and made plans to meet at 7:05 p.m. Lauren arrived at Fujita House and texted, "Here." The information Nathaniel and Beth provided was indeed valuable to the police. However, it was unclear where Lauren had gone afterward and why her car was left unlocked at the beach. The case became clearer when Lauren Astley's body was found. The detectives decided to visit Nathaniel again. However, he was not home this time. They didn't need him there, as they had a search warrant to gather evidence to support their theory about his possible involvement in the murder. Their examination began in the garage, where the specialist quickly noticed signs of a violent incident. Bloodstains were found on the floor, and several elastic cords hanging prominently on the wall matched those tangled in the victim's hair. Additional traces of blood were found throughout the house, including faint splatters on the doorknob, kitchen floor, kitchen sink, and bathroom sink. It was clear someone had attempted to clean up the mess, but did so hastily and poorly. In the basement, detectives discovered a black gym bag containing wet and muddy tennis shoes. In Nathaniel's bedroom, they found a hidden stash with a pair of bloody shoes and wet, bloody clothes. The mud on the shoes appeared to match the mud from the swamp where Lauren's body was found, but samples would need to be sent to a lab for official analysis. Experts later confirmed the detectives' suspicions, revealing that the blood found in Fujita House belonged to Lauren Astley. They gathered compelling evidence linking Nathaniel to his ex-girlfriend's murder, but his location remained unknown, leading to him being declared a wanted person. The investigation advanced rapidly, and just a few hours later, the suspect was located. He had been staying with a cousin in a nearby town. On the morning of July 5, 2011, Nathaniel was arrested on suspicion of murder. He appeared detached and quiet during his arrest and did not resist. However, he also refused to cooperate with investigators. During questioning, he remained silent about the charges against him. The detectives speculated that either he couldn't justify his actions or he was afraid to reveal too much, which is why he chose not to speak. Investigators believe that Lauren visited her ex-boyfriend after meeting with his mother because she was worried about him and wanted to cheer him up. They later went to Fujita's garage, where a fight may have occurred. During this altercation, Nathaniel attacked Lauren and began to strangle her with a bungee cord. After killing her, he drove her car to the beach and disposed of the car keys in a storm drain, which were later recovered. Nathaniel then returned home, loaded Lauren's body into his car, and drove it to a swamp. He attempted to cover up the crime. Although Nathaniel had not been physically violent with Lauren before, he had shown moments of uncontrolled aggression. His actions seemed to be driven by an inability to accept the breakup and feelings of resentment. On August 23, 2011, Nathaniel faced a preliminary hearing where he was charged with first-degree felony assault and battery using a dangerous weapon. When asked if he would plead guilty, he quietly said no. It soon became evident that his lawyers had acted unethically and had established a questionable strategy for his defense. Consequently, the prosecutor requested that the court deny bail for the defendant, and the court approved this request. On February 13, 2013, during the trial, Nathaniel's lawyer, William Sullivan, argued that his client was not mentally competent to stand trial due to insanity. He acknowledged that a murder had occurred, but emphasized that on the evening of July 3, 2011, Nathaniel had a severe episode of clinical depression that led to a psychotic breakdown. This episode impaired his ability to understand his actions during the attack on Lauren. Nathaniel's friends supported the defense's case by describing noticeable changes in his behavior, indicating that he had stopped socializing and lost interest in activities he once loved, like soccer, which he had even practiced despite being sick. Following his breakup with Lauren, it appeared that he transformed dramatically overnight. The psychiatrist who treated Nathaniel also testified at the court hearing. He diagnosed Nathaniel and recommended medication and therapy, but Nathaniel refused both. During the trial, it was proposed that the defendant's mental health issues might have originated from his painful breakup, but were mainly caused by his multiple head injuries from sports. The breakup worsened his condition and led to a severe episode. However, the prosecution disagreed with the defense's claims. Prosecutor Lisa McGovern argued that the defendant was aware of his actions, acted deliberately, and committed the crime for selfish reasons. Nathaniel was found to have been continuously stalking Lauren, causing her distress. On that particular day, just a few hours before her work ended, he showed up at the shopping center and watched her, as confirmed by CCTV footage. Lauren's situation, which arose at his mother's request, gave Nathaniel the chance to act on his criminal intentions. Witness testimonies supported the prosecution's case, and Nathaniel showed no remorse for his actions. An eyewitness saw Nathaniel returning home on the night of the incident with music playing in his car. A cousin also provided damaging information about him. She recalled that on the evening of July 3rd, her brother had called her to hang out, but she was busy and declined. He became very upset, expressing a desire to distract himself, but it seemed that didn't help. The following day, after news of Lauren's death broke, she reached out to him to ask if he was aware of it. He responded that no one would ever find out the truth about her death or the location of the murder weapon. He also acknowledged that he had driven his ex-girlfriend's car to the town beach. Recognizing that Nathaniel was implicated in the situation, his sister urged him to confess. In 2009, after Nathaniel and Lauren break up, an interesting incident occurred. Lauren went to a disco with friends, where a guy showed interest in her. Following the breakup, she decided to give this new guy a chance. However, Nathaniel, her ex, witnessed this and violently confronted the new man, threatening to harm him if he got close to Lauren again. Nathan's jealousy was evident. When he drank alcohol, he became unpredictable and dangerous. This situation revealed Nathaniel's violent tendencies and suggested that he could be a suspect. Additionally, new disturbing details emerged. Lauren's body showed wounds that had been inflicted prior to her death, including evident defensive wounds, which suggested that she had attempted to fight back. A forensic psychiatrist brought in by the prosecution evaluated the defendant's mental state. Unlike the earlier assessment, he concluded that Nathaniel was of sound mind and capable of making rational decisions at the time of the crime. The intense conflict between the prosecution and the defense hinged on whether Nathaniel would be deemed insane. If found insane, his punishment would be significantly less severe. While this wouldn't eliminate the charges against him, it would greatly reduce his level of responsibility. The trial was emotionally charged, as family members from both sides attended. Previously friends, they were now each suffering in their own way. Nathaniel's parents were in tears throughout the trial, struggling to comprehend what had occurred and feeling overwhelming guilt for their son. The burden of his actions weighed heavily on his loved ones. Mary and Malcolm were devastated by the loss of their only daughter. Meanwhile, Lauren was enduring unimaginable pain caused by the man she loved. Experts determined that she lived for several minutes after the rope around her neck was tightened. Lauren's mother desperately sought to understand why this tragedy happened to her daughter and how long it had been in the making. On March 7, 2013, after a 3-week trial, Nathaniel Fujita was found guilty on all counts. The jury took just 1 day to reach their final decision. The 20-year-old received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the verdict, Lauren's father approached Nathaniel's parents and embraced them, showcasing his strong character and compassion. Both families had experienced a profound loss. In response, Mary and Malcolm Astley founded the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund, to educate teenagers about healthy relationships. They believe that Nathaniel's crime could have been avoided. Lauren's family is now committed to raising awareness about preventing relationship violence and coping with breakups. In 2024, the State Superior Court ended mandatory life sentences without parole for offenders under 20 at the time of their crime. As a result, Nathaniel now has a chance for freedom, although no hearing has been confirmed as of June 2025. In March 2025, Nathaniel Fujita requested a retrial in the Superior Court, with prosecutors responding, but the outcome has yet to be decided. Some believe that love can easily turn to hate. Obsessive love, mixed with jealousy and selfishness, can sometimes lead to irrational actions. The tragic experiences of the Fujita and Ashley families illustrate this point. On December 5, 1975, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a married couple was on their way home from a school basketball game. At around 8:30 p.m., the wife decided to visit her niece, Lindy, who lived nearby. They parked their car near the apartment complex, and she got out to quickly check on her niece, leaving her husband in the car. However, when she reached the apartment, she discovered that the front door was unlocked. Cautiously peering inside, she saw a knocked-over floor lamp and other items scattered around. The disarray of the apartment indicated that a fight had occurred. When she noticed strange stains on the floor resembling blood, she stepped into the living room. What she discovered would haunt her forever. In the center of the room lay Lindy, with a knife stabbed into her throat. Overwhelmed with panic, she ran out of the house and hurried to her car to call the police. The police arrived at the scene and were baffled about who could have had a conflict with the young 19-year-old girl, who had recently gotten married. They wondered what could have led to her brutal murder. Lindy Sue Beekler was born on January 31, 1956. Her parents divorced when she was very young. She was raised by her mother. Her father moved to the suburbs, remarried, and had a son with his new wife, making him Lindy's half-brother. From a young age, Lindy was curious and cheerful. She loved exploring new activities. Lindy participated in the Girl Scouts, went hiking, enjoyed boating, and joined different clubs. Lindy was a positive person who made everyone feel good. Her bright smile encouraged others to smile too. Above all, she treasured her family. One of her favorite things to do was curl up on the couch with her mother. In those moments, she felt like the happiest person alive because her mother was not only a caring parent, but also her best friend. Recently, Lindy had been employed at a flower shop, where her boss and co-workers described her as very hardworking, humble, and somewhat shy. However, once they got to know her better, Lindy revealed her fun side. She had a great sense of humor. Despite this, she preferred not to be the center of attention. Lindy married at a young age despite her insecurities. Her husband, Philip Beekler, was 5 years older than her. They first met when Lindy was visiting her sister. They were instantly attracted to each other. On October 19th, the year before the attack, Lindy and Philip tied the knot. The ceremony was officiated by Philip's grandfather, who blessed their union, saying they were perfect for one another. Philip worked part-time as an agent at a car rental company while studying art at Millersville State College. It appeared he was inspired by his parents. His mother owned an art gallery and was deeply passionate about art. Lindy is just 2 months away from turning 20 and has recently begun to embrace adult life as a married woman. Philip and Lindy were happily living together in their small one-bedroom apartment. However, Lindy felt uneasy being home alone. She never felt safe since they moved in. She constantly sensed that someone was watching her through the sliding glass door, though she couldn't pinpoint anyone specific. Overall, she was simply afraid to be alone in the apartment. In January, they planned to move to a new place in Manor Township. In the evenings, Lindy got home from work a couple of hours before her husband. She would lock the doors and turn on all the lights, carefully listening to every noise. During the investigation of the crime scene, the police found that Lindy had been stabbed 19 times. The attack involved 2 different knives. One knife, which the attacker had brought, was never found, while the other knife came from Lindy's kitchen. This kitchen knife was still in her neck when her aunt discovered her. Lindy's body showed 11 stab wounds to her chest and upper abdomen. 5 to her back, and 3 to her neck. One of the stabs had pierced the carotid artery, causing her to bleed to death. Experts noted that Lindy had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she fought fiercely for her life until the very end. The apartment was in chaos, with blood everywhere. It appeared that, after finishing her shift at the flower shop, Lindy had stopped to buy groceries, as bags of food were left on the kitchen table, still unpacked. This indicates that the attack occurred right after she returned home. Several pieces of evidence were collected at the crime scene. A shoe print, likely size 10 or 11, was discovered on the kitchen floor. This print suggested that the attacker was likely a large, strong man. Another piece of evidence hinted at a possible motive, although Lindy was fully clothed when found. Detectives suspected she had been abused. Male fluid was discovered on her underwear, which could provide the perpetrator's DNA. However, in 1975, forensic capabilities were limited. Experts could only identify the attacker's blood type and compare it with that of a suspect, but they needed to identify a suspect first. Unfortunately, that was where the evidence trail ended. The police also lacked the perpetrator's fingerprints, as the knife handle found in Lindy's throat was wrapped in a kitchen towel. The news of Lindy's tragic death devastated her family. Relatives called Philip at work, telling him he needed to come home immediately because something had happened to Lindy. As he rushed to their apartment, he feared the worst, but he could never have imagined that his beloved wife had been brutally killed. The police did not allow Philip inside the apartment, leaving him confused about what had happened. They kept him in the hallway until he found out the heartbreaking news that Lindy was dead. Seeing how pale he became, medics gave him a sedative, and the police took him to his mother's house. For about 4 days, Philip felt lost. He couldn't tell whether it was day or night or how much time had passed since the tragedy. He had to sit and wait for answers while the police continued their investigation. Detectives interviewed her co-workers and employer, and none of them noticed anything unusual about her behavior. Lindy went to work at the flower shop in a good mood. That day, she did not appear anxious or scared. There were no dissatisfied customers. Everything was completely normal. Lindy excitedly shared with her colleagues about the Christmas gift she had prepared for her husband. That evening, she calmly got into her car, waved goodbye to her colleagues, and drove home. Unbeknownst to anyone, it would be her last evening alive. Around 5:30 p.m., after work, Lindy went to the car dealership where her husband, Philip, worked to pick up his paycheck. She cashed the check at the bank and then went to a nearby grocery store to buy groceries, filling 4 bags. Afterward, she headed home, parked her car, and began unloading the bags. It seemed likely she would need to make 2 trips. At that moment, someone likely entered her apartment and attacked her. Detectives speculated on this since there were no signs of forced entry, and Lindy was not the kind of person to let a stranger into her home. This led the police to believe that Lindy knew her attacker, felt safe being alone with them. The first person the detectives looked at as a suspect was the victim's husband, Philip. However, the family and friends insisting that Philip and Lindy were a happy couple. Philip deeply loved Lindy and felt incredibly lucky to be dating her. Amazed that someone so beautiful would be interested in him, he said she changed his life for the better by inspiring him to enroll in college and pursue painting. In return, he supported her dream of opening a flower shop. When Lindy was killed, it devastated Philip. He couldn't bear to stay in their apartment, where every corner reminded him of her, so he moved out. Although he had a strong alibi, investigators were slow to clear him as a suspect. Following Lindy's death, Philip felt lost. He wandered the streets for hours, dropped out of college. They had dreamt of finishing their studies, starting a family, and planning their future together. Now, in an instant, all their dreams collapsed, like a sandcastle washed away by the tide. Philip had to completely rebuild his life in light of this tragic reality. The second suspect in the investigation was Bob, Lindy's direct supervisor. His favorable comments and positive evaluations of Lindy took an unexpected turn. The day before her tragic death, Lindy baked him blueberry muffins for his birthday. Bob spoke so highly of her that police began to question whether he had developed an inappropriate attachment. At 35 years old, single, and without an alibi. Bob caught the attention of the authorities, prompting them to scrutinize him more closely. The pressure became overwhelming, leading him to hire a lawyer to safeguard his privacy. Bob passed a lie detector test and fully cooperated with the police. After clearing both Lindy's husband and Bob as suspects, the police interviewed hundreds of people, including friends, family, and acquaintances. Yet they found no one who might have wanted to harm her. Neighbors were also questioned, but no one reported seeing anything unusual that day. The atmosphere in the apartment complex grew tense as residents began purchasing weapons for protection. While violence in other neighborhoods was concerning, the murder of a young woman next door felt particularly alarming. A note from the police was taped to the Beechlers' front door, indicating that it was a crime scene and restricting access for local residents. This served as a constant reminder of the tragedy and the unsettling reality that the killer might still be nearby. The investigation hit a dead end. The only clue from neighbors was a report of an unfamiliar dark-colored car parked outside Lindy's house at the time of her death, with its headlights on. Even if the driver was not involved in the crime, they could have been a witness. However, locating the car proved to be impossible. Neighbors' descriptions varied widely, and no one could recall the license plate number. Meanwhile, the police station was overwhelmed with calls. Although some leads seemed promising, none led to concrete answers, forcing investigators to develop their own theories. One theory suggested that Lindy was being stalked by someone who observed her and her husband's routines, waiting for the right moment to attack. It's possible the intruder entered the apartment while Lindy was unloading groceries, or that it was a burglar who planned to steal valuables, but panicked and assaulted her with a knife when she unexpectedly returned. However, the burglary theory was weak because Lindy's purse, containing her jewelry, was still in the apartment. Additionally, the nature of the abuse assault did not align with typical burglar behavior. The police eventually identified an 18-year-old suspect, who was arrested. He was known for committing terrible acts. He had already attacked 4 women, binding them with their own clothing and stabbing them with a screwdriver. In one instance, when a victim attempted to flee, he chased her in his car and tried to run her over. The location and timing of his crimes made the police suspect his involvement in Lindy's attack. However, investigations revealed he was not connected to that incident, as he was at work that day, supported by multiple colleagues. In December 1976, Lindy's family visited her grave to pay their respects. What they found left them in shock. Someone had vandalized the grave. The headstone was covered in knife marks. Pieces of it were scattered nearby, and the rest was splattered with red spray paint. The police took this incident seriously, as they believed the vandal might have also been involved in Lindy's death. The use of a knife suggested the vandal was aware of how Lindy had died, and notably, only her grave had been targeted in the entire cemetery. Since the family had kept the burial location private, it indicated that the vandal had intentionally sought it out, possibly by following family members. Unfortunately, the detectives were unable to identify the culprit. An entire year went by without any answers, leaving Lindy's family in a state of confusion and distress about what happened to her. In the following years, detectives looked into many people who were connected to Lindy's life. They examined her mother's boyfriend, looked into frequent customers of the flower shop, and even explored possible connections to serial killers active in Pennsylvania at that time. In their search for answers, they even consulted psychics. Despite these efforts, the case of Lindy Beechler's death remained unsolved. 25 years after Lindy's tragic death, the lead detective retired, leaving the Lindy case as one of the oldest unsolved cases in Lancaster County. In 2006, the investigation into Lindy's death was transferred to a special group in Pennsylvania that focused on old unsolved cases, utilizing new techniques and perspectives. However, they too were unable to make any progress. Decades after his wife's death, Philip Beechler discovered the DNA analysis techniques used to convict the perpetrator. He believed these methods could also be applied to his wife Lindy's case. In 2019, police applied these techniques to analyze DNA from the crime scene and created a composite sketch of a potential suspect based on the DNA. A computer program produced 2 portraits. One depicted how the suspect likely appeared at the time of Lindy's attack, and the other showed what the suspect might look like at age 65. While the portraits weren't exact representations, they revealed important details about the suspect, including fair skin, brown eyes, dark hair, and possible distinctive features. Despite this progress, locating the suspect was still difficult. The DNA sample was analyzed by C.C. Moore, a well-known American genetic genealogist. She discovered that the DNA found on the victim's underwear in 1975 was connected to a small town in Italy. Moore invested a lot of time identifying individuals with Italian ancestry who were living in Lancaster County at the time of Lindy's murder. She traced the migration patterns from this small Italian town to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. After ruling out over 2,000 individuals with similar genetic profiles, she was able to use public records to narrow it down to one suspect. This led her to identify the likely killer, a man named David Sinopoli. Investigators checked the name against existing databases, but found no records. This man had never been noticed by the police before, and his name was not on any suspect lists. However, while reviewing the case files, detectives learned that David lived in the same apartment complex as the Beechlers. To establish his connection to Lindy's death, they needed to obtain David's DNA. On February 11, 2022, David was at Philadelphia International Airport waiting for his flight. To pass the time, he bought coffee, not realizing that police were observing him from afar. After David finished his coffee, he threw the empty cup into a trash bin. An officer then discreetly collected the discarded cup and placed it in a plastic bag for further examination. The cup was sent to a lab for DNA analysis, which revealed a match between the DNA on the cup and the seminal fluid found on Lindy Beekler's underwear, confirming that David Sinopoli had been at the crime scene. Additionally, 2 drops of blood found on her stockings matched his DNA, providing further evidence. Initially, investigators thought the significant amount of blood at the crime scene belonged to the victim. However, they also considered the possibility that the perpetrator had injured himself and left behind traces of his blood. On July 17, 2022, around 7 a.m., police arrived at David's home, a few miles from the site where Lindy was murdered years earlier. He did not resist arrest, but his wife, who had been married to him for 36 years, was completely shocked. They had 3 children and 9 grandchildren, all of whom were unaware that they had been living with a criminal and murderer. Following the tragic murder of 19-year-old Lindy, David had lived quietly for nearly 47 years, never revealing his past and believing he would escape punishment. After David was arrested, Lindy's family had a reason to celebrate. Unfortunately, many family members never got to see justice served. Lindy's father died in 2000, and her mother followed in 2007. Her husband, Philip, was still alive and had remarried around 1990. Even though he hadn't initially planned to, he wanted to honor Lindy's hopes for him by finishing college, attending graduate school, and becoming an artist, which he accomplished. Eventually, he was able to let go of the tragedy and move forward with his life. The day after David's arrest, the police held a press conference announcing that they considered the case of Lindy Beekler's murder closed. Friends and family of David struggled to believe he was involved, thinking there must have been a misunderstanding. However, it's painful to acknowledge that this man evaded consequences for his actions for nearly 50 years, living as if nothing had happened after taking a young woman's future. Years went by, but the police never forgot about the case and continuously worked to solve it. Eventually, justice was served. David Sinopoli was taken into custody without the option for bail. Initially, he strongly denied any connection to Beekler's death, but as the trial date approached, he changed his mind and agreed to a plea deal. On October 19, 2023, 48 years after the crime, David Sinopoli pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, aggravated assault, and burglary. He received a prison sentence of 25 to 50 years. The judge mentioned that considering the defendant's age, this effectively amounted to a life sentence. David never explained why he killed Lindy by brutally stabbing her 19 times and violating her body to fulfill his selfish desires. Lindy and David were neighbors in the same apartment complex, but there is no evidence that they ever interacted prior to the crime. This leaves the true motives behind his actions a mystery, even to the police. It's possible that David was strongly attracted to her and eventually succumbed to his hidden urges. His primal instincts took over, which is why he is now in prison. Not all relationships are healthy. Some can be harmful, leave lasting emotional and physical damage. This is the troubling story of a romance between a prominent dentist and her coworker. From the beginning, their relationship displayed signs of turmoil. Over nearly 5 years, they broke up and reconciled multiple times. Despite the ups and downs, she remained optimistic, giving him numerous opportunities. In reality, he never truly let her go. He employed various forms of emotional manipulation, pressure, and psychological control to keep her close. When she finally gathered the strength to take charge of her life and informed him of her decision to move on for good, it triggered a series of events with catastrophic consequences. Preeti Reddy was born in the lively Indian city of Pimpri-Chinchwad, located along the Pavana River. The family enjoyed a comfortable life due to her parents' stable and substantial income. Preeti grew up with her younger sister Nithya. From a young age, the sisters developed a strong bond and were almost inseparable. They shared everything: childhood secrets, dreams, and challenges. Their parents created a loving environment, emphasizing strong cultural values and respect for family. As financially secure individuals, their parents were committed to investing in their daughter's well-being and future. Education was a top priority in the Reddy home. The girls were given every opportunity to thrive. In 1996, the Reddy family made a significant change by moving to Australia in search of better opportunities and a brighter future. They settled in a quiet suburb of Sydney and bought a spacious home that quickly became their refuge. Preeti and Nithya started attending a well-regarded private school, where both thrived academically. Preeti developed into a bright, charismatic young woman who was friendly, sociable, and ambitious. From an early age, and she aspired to follow her parents' path in healthcare, finding true joy in helping others and making a positive impact. After finishing high school, Preeti made an unexpected decision to return to India to study dentistry at a medical university in New Delhi. Her parents, always supportive, trusted her choices and allowed her the freedom to decide for herself. By 2019, Preeti had earned her degree and returned to Sydney, where she moved back in with her family. She started working at the Dental and Physiotherapy Centre in Western Sydney, while also enhancing her skills at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne. Later, she joined Glenbrook Dental, a comprehensive care clinic where she worked as a general practitioner. Highly skilled and passionate about her profession, Dr. Preeti Reddy was recognized by her colleagues and patients as a rising star in dentistry. She was committed to continuous learning and improving her expertise. In early 2013, just before a major life event, she was enrolled in specialized courses for dental implants, hoped to open her own clinic in Melbourne. Unfortunately, those dreams would remain unfulfilled. While still studying at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne, Preeti met a young dentist named Harshwardhan Nard, whom his friends called Harshwardhan Nard. He, like Preeti, was of Indian descent and came from a family of healthcare professionals. Following their tradition by pursuing a career in dentistry, the two quickly connected, feeling an attraction toward each other almost right away. A few months into their friendship, they started dating, but early on, some warning signs emerged. Harshwardhan was possessive and had a quick temper. He frequently questioned Preeti's choices, emotionally manipulated her, and tried to control her subtly. He also undermined her confidence, making her feel inadequate or inferior. He often blamed her for his struggles and claimed she was the source of his pain. Nithya, Preeti's younger sister, was the first to sense that something was wrong. She knew Preeti was dating someone, but Preeti had never introduced him to the family. She never brought him home and avoided talking about him. At the same time, Preeti's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, insecure, and distant. The spark in her eyes faded, turning her from a joyful and confident woman into someone who seemed tense, under emotional strain. Harshwardhan was controlling the relationship, and Preeti appeared trapped. Their parents often asked to meet this man in Preeti's life, but she consistently changed the subject or refused to discuss it. It was clear that she felt uncomfortable in the relationship, yet she remained emotionally tied to Harshwardhan, and found it difficult to escape. Harshvardhan lived in Tamworth and worked at a dental clinic. He was in a long-distance relationship with Preeti, as they never lived together. Deep down, she felt that their relationship wouldn't end well. It was unstable, filled with frequent arguments and emotional tension, leaving Preeti feeling overwhelmed. For a long time, she kept their relationship a secret. It wasn't until about 6 months in that she shared it with a few close friends. Preeti's sister, Nithya, met Harshvardhan a few times and immediately disliked him. She later remembered feeling that there was something unsettling about his presence. By 2014, Preeti and Harshvardhan were publicly acknowledged as a couple, but their relationship remained complicated. Preeti never introduced him to her parents and refused to meet his family. Soon after, they broke up, but Preeti chose to keep it private. This cycle of breaking up and getting back together continued for years. At times, she wouldn't inform anyone about their breakups, and at other times, she wouldn't admit they had reconciled. It became clear that she felt embarrassed by their unstable relationship. Harshvardhan often accused Preeti of not investing enough in their relationship and pushed her to move to Tamworth so they could live together. However, Preeti was resolute. She didn't want to abandon her career or leave her family in Sydney. Meanwhile, Harshvardhan was unwilling to move for her. In the fall of 2016, Preeti and Harshvardhan broke up again. Preeti wanted it to be final this time, but Harshvardhan wasn't ready to let go. In October, he started planning a surprise party for her upcoming 30th birthday. However, the surprise did not happen because Preeti had already organized a celebration at her parents' house, invited close friends and colleagues, deliberately excluding Harshvardhan. Despite this clear message, Harshvardhan continued to try to re-enter her life. He pleaded for another chance, insisting that he had changed and that things would be different this time. Although he had never been physically aggressive, his constant emotional pressure had caused Preeti significant distress. This lack of visible harm may have contributed to Preeti deciding to give him one last opportunity, hoping for a fresh start. However, things did not improve. Preeti still had emotional feelings for Harshvardhan, which made it difficult to cut ties completely. Additionally, Harshvardhan manipulated her emotions, making her feel guilty for the end of their relationship. In 2018, Preeti made one last attempt to save her relationship, but soon realized that no matter how much she tried or sacrificed, nothing was going to change. That fall, she decided to end it for good. Just a few weeks later, in November, she met a young physician from Melbourne, and they quickly formed a genuine connection. This new man was everything Harshvardhan was not: kind, attentive, and compassionate. For the first time in years, Preeti was open about her relationship, proudly introducing him to her family and friends. She felt truly happy and hopeful about the future. She even considered moving to Melbourne to be closer to him by applying for jobs in the area. Prestigious dental centers quickly responded to her applications, and after receiving multiple offers, she chose a clinic where she hoped to work after completing her responsibilities in Sydney. In December, she excitedly told her friends that she had never felt this way before. She had finally moved on from her past. Her loved ones were delighted to see her so happy. But unfortunately, this joy was short-lived. In January, Harshvardhan found out that Preeti was in a new relationship. Overwhelmed by jealousy and anger, he began contacting her again through calls and messages, hoping to meet her. However, Preeti had decided to move on and ignored all of his attempts to reach her. By February, during a phone conversation with his brother, Harshvardhan admitted that he couldn't accept what he felt was a betrayal. He spoke about Preeti as if she were still his, viewing her new relationship as a personal insult. He expressed that he wouldn't let her marry someone else and suggested he might take extreme actions. At the time, his words seemed like mere bitter threats, stemming from frustration and a sense of powerlessness. On March 31st, 2019, Sydney hosted a 2-day international dental conference showcasing the latest advancements in dentistry. Dr. Preeti attended the conference and stayed at the Swissôtel Hotel with 2 close friends and colleagues. Her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Harshvardhan, also rented a room at this hotel. After the first day, Preeti shared with her friends that she felt uneasy because Harshvardhan was watching her closely throughout the conference and seemed to be waiting for a chance to talk to her. His behavior was making her feel uncomfortable and unpredictable. Later that evening, the friends went to a nightclub to relax, but Preeti still felt anxious and kept looking over her shoulder. The second day was filled with even more tension as Harshvardhan insisted they meet and talk. Preeti felt anxious and conflicted, while her friends urged her not to give in despite their concerns. After the conference, she reluctantly decided to speak with Harshvardhan, hoping to resolve their issues. She had practiced what she wanted to say, wishing he would listen and put an end to the drama so she could continue with her life. At around 6:30 p.m. on March 2nd, surveillance cameras recorded a gray Volkswagen Golf, which belonged to Preeti, leaving the underground garage of Swissôtel Hotel. Preeti was driving, and Harshvardhan was seated next to her. About an hour later, they arrived at the Ravi's Cumin Indian restaurant in nearby Crow's Nest and entered together. Witnesses, including other diners and restaurant staff, noted that there was significant tension at their table. Preeti looked anxious and wanted to leave, while Harshvardhan tried to hold her hand and interrupted her as she spoke. The waiter in charge of their table recalled that Preeti mentioned she was planning to move to Melbourne, confessed to being in love with someone else, and asked Harshvardhan to let her go. Despite this, Harshvardhan seemed unaware of her feelings. He continued to talk about marriage and promised to move to Sydney just to be close to her. Around 10:16 p.m., they left the restaurant and walked to their car but didn't get in. They argued for over an hour at that spot. Surveillance cameras show Harshvardhan reaching out towards Preeti, then pushing her as she backed away and took a step back, causing her to stumble. They finally drove off close to midnight and spent another 15 minutes driving around the city before stopping in a mall parking lot. Neither of them got out of the car. Surveillance cameras on the building captured them in a heated argument, with Harshvardhan making wild gestures and Preeti crying visibly. At about 2 p.m., Preeti got out of the car and entered a 24-hour fast food restaurant in the mall. She bought a bottle of water and waited near the entrance, seemingly for Harshvardhan to come out. However, when she went back, he was still sitting in the car. They then drove to the Swissôtel Hotel. He quietly led Preeti past the front desk and into his suite. After around 3 a.m., she did not leave. On the morning of March 3rd, around 10 a.m., Preeti called her younger sister to say she would be home in a couple of hours. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Her family expected her to be home by lunchtime, but she never arrived. It was unusual for her phone to be off. By 3 p.m., worry turned into panic. Preeti was always in contact and would inform someone if she was running late. Her family quickly began reaching out to her friends and coworkers to find out where she might be. It was then they discovered that she had been seen at a conference with her ex, Harshvardhan, who was reportedly trying to reconnect with her and had been persistent. Nithya attempted to call Harshvardhan, but he either ignored her calls or didn't answer, even though his phone was still on. On the evening of March 3rd, the Reddy family went to the police to report Preeti missing, expressing their concerns that her ex-boyfriend might be involved. Simultaneously, they began their own search by reaching out to anyone who might have seen or talked to Preeti. Nithya also posted on social media, sharing recent photos and asking for any information to help locate her sister. Within 24 hours, her post reached nearly 2,000 people, including Preeti's former patients. Many offered to assist in the search or to help spread the word, but no one had any concrete information about Preeti's location. The only potential lead remained Harshvardhan, who continued to avoid answering calls. On the afternoon of March 4th, Harshvardhan finally took one of Nithya's calls. He responded in a disturbingly calm manner, stating that Preeti was an adult who would return soon. He acknowledged seeing her at the conference but claimed they had only spoken briefly before going their separate ways. Oddly, just an hour later, Harshvardhan called Nithya back, this time very angry. He yelled at her, asking why she was contacting his friends, family, and co-workers about Preeti. He accused the Reddy family of unfairly blaming him and damaging his reputation without any proof. His reaction raised serious concerns, while he showed little worry about Preeti's sudden disappearance or the possibility that she might be in danger. He seemed more upset that people were searching for her and that attention was being directed at him. After discovering the situation, it was clear that Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, and he likely became the last person to see her. Harshwardhan's family urged him to go to the police and provide a full account before any formal summons. Later that day, he went to a police station in Sydney, saying he wanted to assist and share what he knew. Officers quickly noticed his unusual behavior. He was sweating, visibly anxious, and pacing while gesturing wildly. He claimed to have seen Preeti not only at a conference but also during dinner on March 2nd. He stated that they had a final conversation that helped them both move on, and that he called her a cab, which he said was the last time he saw her. However, there were inconsistencies in his story. When asked to repeat the events, he became confused, contradicted himself, and struggled to keep his timeline consistent. Despite his odd behavior, the police had no solid evidence to detain him, so they let him go. Before he left, a detective casually mentioned that they were examining surveillance footage that might show the movements of both Preeti and Harshwardhan that evening, intending to reconstruct the timeline. This statement appeared to unsettle Harshwardhan. A few hours later, he returned to the police station and changed his story. He confessed that he hadn't called a cab for Preeti. She had actually driven herself in her own car, which was the same Volkswagen Golf they had used to go to the restaurant. When questioned about why he had initially lied, he said he was nervous and didn't think those details were important. Later that day, on March 4th, news reported a serious car accident on the New England highway. A BMW had sped into oncoming traffic and collided head-on with a truck. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene and was identified as Dr. Harshwardhan Nard. This raised the question, how did he end up in such a terrible accident on a mostly empty road? Surveillance footage showed that Harshwardhan had quickly sped up and deliberately driven into the truck's path. This incident appeared to be an act of self-harm, and further evidence soon supported this idea. It was evident that the detective's mention of the footage had left Harshwardhan visibly shaken. He likely understood that investigators would soon reconstruct the events of the entire evening. The day after Harshwardhan's death, Preeti's abandoned Volkswagen Golf was discovered in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Sydney. Inside the trunk, in a large blue suitcase, was her lifeless body. Forensic investigators later confirmed that she had suffered a severe head injury and multiple stab wounds, 11 in total, mostly to her neck and back. 2 days later, after reviewing security footage and interviewing witnesses, the police were able to piece together the events of March 2nd. Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, likely seeking closure and trying to move on from their relationship. A waiter, who overheard parts of their conversation, remembered that Preeti appeared upset and frightened. After dinner, they drove around for a few hours before arriving at Swissôtel Hotel. It is suspected that he emotionally manipulated her, a tactic he had used in the past, making her feel guilty. Since she was never seen leaving the hotel, detectives believe that the tragic event likely took place in the room. A forensic investigation uncovered traces of blood in the bathroom, although it had been cleaned so thoroughly that housekeeping noticed nothing unusual. It is thought that Preeti went to the bathroom to call her new partner, and that Harshwardhan, overhearing the call, became enraged. Once she ended the call, he attacked her from behind, hitting her on the head and then inflicting multiple wounds with a sharp object. After finishing what he had to do, Harshwardhan calmly cleaned himself up and went to the front desk to extend his stay for another night. He had breakfast in the hotel restaurant before heading out to shop at local stores. There, he bought a large blue suitcase and various cleaning supplies. He returned to his hotel room around 5 p.m., checked out, and when a staff member offered to help with his luggage, they remarked that the suitcase seemed quite heavy. Harshwardhan casually explained that he had bought too many gifts for his family. He then loaded his belongings into Preeti's Volkswagen Golf and drove to a quiet corner of the city, where he parked the car in a discreet spot, hoping it would remain unnoticed for some time. After everything that happened, Harshwardhan picked up his BMW from the parking garage and drove home to Tamworth. On the way, he stopped at a gas station to fill his tank and grab some coffee. Several witnesses later identified him there, noting that his phone kept ringing. but he either declined the calls or ignored them. It was later confirmed that those calls were from Nithya, who was desperately trying to contact him while looking for her sister. Harshvardhan likely thought he had committed the perfect crime, covering his tracks so well that investigators wouldn't be able to connect him to anything. He hadn't considered that there were surveillance cameras at almost every place he and Preeti had gone that day. Those recordings would soon reveal the truth. When Harshvardhan understood his error, that the police would have clear evidence of his involvement, he decided not to wait for an arrest or trial. Instead, he took control of the situation and ended his life before justice could catch up with him. Harshvardhan's family, despite the increasing evidence against him, struggled to accept the idea that he could commit such a terrible act. They found it hard to believe he could take another person's life in such a brutal and deliberate way. Meanwhile, the Reddy family, grieving the loss of their cherished daughter and sister, decided to take action. They started a campaign to create the first center in Australia focused on helping women impacted by domestic violence. This center would not only provide emotional support, but also offer safe housing, legal advice, and help for those trying to leave abusive or manipulative relationships. The Reddy family played a key role in supporting the project by providing funding, using their voices to raise public awareness through media and outreach. They made sure that people in need were aware of a safe place to go, where they could find both protection and support for healing.
Crystal McDowell was born on October 26, 1979, in Baytown, Texas. Her childhood was challenging, as her parents, Pamela Sue Surratt and Anthony Paul Tony Walters, struggled with addiction, leading to an unstable home life. Tragically, she lost both parents to apparent overdoses by the age of 11. After their deaths, she was raised by her grandmother and later by her uncle, Jeff Walters. Despite these hardships, she was known for her vibrant smile, striking blue eyes, and uplifting personality. Crystal pursued a career as a flight attendant, where her adventurous spirit thrived as she traveled across the country. During her journey, she met Stephen Wayne McDowell, who was 7 years older than she. Described as gentle and soft-spoken despite his large stature, Stephen won Crystal's heart. They married in April 2007 after dating for a while. He had a daughter from a previous marriage and worked as a shipping manager, but he struggled to maintain stable employment, which forced Crystal to become the primary breadwinner. While she excelled in her career, Stephen's professional instability created tension in their relationship, especially concerning her frequent travels. As jealousy grew, Stephen began to suspect Crystal of having affairs during her flights, despite the lack of evidence of infidelity. Friends noted that Crystal valued her family and sought stability, given her difficult past. In 2016, after 15 successful years as a flight attendant, she decided to leave and join her family's real estate business. This shift allowed her to spend more time with her children and provided a sense of stability. Her uncle Jeff was proud to welcome her into the third generation of their real estate legacy. Crystal quickly excelled in her new role, being recognized for her charm, professionalism, and dedication. However, she confided in close friends that this career change also served a strategic purpose, as she believed it would help her secure custody of her children if she and Stephen divorced. By February 2017, Crystal's marriage had deteriorated significantly, prompting her to file for divorce due to years of emotional distress. On March 20th, she called 911, claiming Stephen had threatened her and their children. The authorities responded but treated the case as a precaution rather than a criminal incident. At that time, there were no custody arrangements, allowing Stephen to legally be with his children. Although officers attempted to contact him, they were unsuccessful. A few days later, Stephen returned the children, and Crystal chose not to press charges, opting instead to focus on reducing tension for the sake of their kids. Crystal's friends commented that she tried her best to keep the divorce amicable, putting the happiness of her children first. Stephen's adult daughter was troubled by this incident and questioned her father about his behavior. He expressed anger over alleged affairs that Crystal had during their marriage, accusations that those close to her dismissed as false. Many who knew them recognized that their relationship had been toxic for years, and even Stephen's daughter acknowledged that, while she and Crystal had a great relationship, the marriage had always been unstable. Although their divorce was finalized in June 2017 and appeared to be friendly, especially since Crystal helped Stephen find and purchase a new home while renovating her own, issues beneath the surface remained unresolved. Crystal often asked her family not to mention their plans or outings to Stephen, fearing his unpredictable reactions. Even simple activities, like spending time with a friend, could set him off. Despite being legally divorced, Stephen seemed unable or unwilling to accept the situation. His social media activity displayed a concerning trend. Shortly after the divorce, he changed his profile picture to a tombstone, then to an image of Santa Muerte, and later reverted to a photo of himself with Crystal. His post suggested an image of a happy family. Meanwhile, Crystal continued to emotionally support Stephen, checking in on him regularly. He claimed to be adjusting to the separation and focusing on his life, but his behavior suggested otherwise. One of Crystal's aunts noticed that Stephen frequently posted pictures of himself bringing Crystal coffee in bed, as if their relationship was still going strong. In an effort to maintain a harmonious co-parenting relationship, Crystal planned a trip with Stephen and the kids, but their intimacy only blurred the lines further. Then, in August 2017, things shifted. Crystal, now 37, met Paul Hargrave, a local jeweler and fellow single parent. Paul was charming, ambitious, and shared Crystal's passion for travel and adventure. Their relationship developed quickly, and for the first time in a long time, Crystal felt truly happy. Although she wanted to tell her family about Paul, she asked them to keep it a secret until she found the right time to inform Stephen, still fearful of his reaction. However, that fear didn't stop her from publicly sharing her happiness. On August 23, she posted on social media that she had never felt so joyful and that her heart was filled with a happiness she never thought possible. Just 2 days later, on August 25, Hurricane Harvey approached. Crystal woke up at Paul's house, preparing to face the storm and fulfill her responsibilities for the day. At 7:01 a.m., she texted Stephen to ask if he had collected clean water for the kids and informed him that she was heading to his house to take shelter with them. She intended to visit a property afterward for a showing. Paul's security cameras recorded the last known images of Crystal that morning, first in the kitchen, then walking outside in heels, holding her phone, as she got into her black Mercedes-Benz. She was never seen again. Later that day, Crystal's Uncle Jeff became worried. They were close, working together in real estate and communicating frequently. He tried calling her several times to let her know that a scheduled showing had been canceled because of the storm. When she didn't answer, Jeff contacted Stephen, who sent a suspicious text, allegedly from Crystal's phone, at 9:30 a.m., stating that she planned to pick up the kids and go to Dallas. Jeff was immediately suspicious. Crystal never changed her plans without informing him, and her phone was essential for her work. Things didn't add up, and fearing something was wrong, he reported her missing to the police before noon on August 26. As floodwaters from Hurricane Harvey swept through Houston, Jeff and 2 family members confronted Stephen. Stephen claimed Crystal hadn't been to his house in over a week, but his daughter told Jeff that she had hugged her mother the day before. That same day, a sheriff's deputy conducted a welfare check at Stephen's home. Inside, authorities discovered Crystal's black dress in the washing machine, along with her purse and handbag, clear evidence that she had recently been there. For her Uncle Jeff, who had helped raise her, it was evident that Stephen was involved in her disappearance. Unfortunately, at the time, Hurricane Harvey had devastated the area, and many law enforcement officers and first responders were focused on rescue efforts in flooded neighborhoods. Consequently, the investigation stalled almost immediately. Desperate for answers, Jeff decided to reach out to the media to raise awareness and search for clues. However, his efforts were overshadowed by the constant news coverage of the storm. After days of no progress, Jeff hired a private investigator, feeling frustrated with the silence of local authorities. This decision sparked backlash. The local police chief and district attorney opposed the involvement of an outside investigator in Crystal's case, arguing that crucial evidence could be compromised. This resulted in increased tensions between Crystal's family, law enforcement, and the local media in Houston. Unwilling to give up, Jeff teamed up with Crystal's new boyfriend, Paul, to offer a $15,000 reward for credible information. They launched a social media campaign that ultimately attracted public attention. However, the investigators began to suspect not only Stephen but also Jeff and Paul. Although Jeff was tirelessly searching for Crystal, law enforcement remained skeptical of him. Rumors about his personal life, including his same-sex relationships, spread throughout the town of Baytown, leading some to believe that these biases influenced how authorities perceived his involvement. The local police commander dismissed Jeff's concerns during a national broadcast, labeling him as overly emotional and a hindrance to the investigation. Paul was also scrutinized. After taking a polygraph test with inconclusive results, his credibility came into question. Things worsened when he sent surveillance footage from his home to news outlets instead of directly giving it to the police. Paul defended his actions by stating that he initially tried to share the videos with the sheriff's office but felt ignored, prompting him to go public to clear his name. Then there was Stephen. Even though he displayed manipulative behavior, threatening self-harm if Crystal left him, investigators perceived him as polite, helpful, and cooperative. However, family and friends described the marriage as deeply unhealthy and controlling. Authorities did not see Stephen as a potential threat or a vengeful ex-husband. This perspective began to shift on Tuesday, August 29th, as floodwaters receded. A family friend discovered Crystal's black Mercedes-Benz parked outside a dilapidated motel, an area highlighted during their online campaign. The doors were unlocked, and the keys were still in the ignition. Investigators suspect the car was staged as a burglary, but flooding has made it difficult to access. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses showed Crystal's car entering the motel lot at 6:37 a.m. on August 26, the day she disappeared. Just 5 hours later, Stephen was seen on camera at a nearby gas station. He did not purchase gas. Instead, he drove toward the motel, seemingly checking to see if the car was still there. Even more unsettling, other footage captured a hooded figure resembling Stephen riding a bicycle through the rain near the motel that same morning. The evidence was accumulating, and for the first time, attention turned to Stephen, not as a grieving ex-husband but as a potential suspect in a case that had gone too long without resolution. The investigation took a significant turn when surveillance footage from a Walmart, situated just across the highway from the motel where Crystal's car was discovered, showed a man who looked like Stephen buying a bicycle early on the morning of August 26, 2017. He paid with cash, and the timing matched the sighting of a hooded figure on a bike near the scene. Despite this troubling evidence, he denied being involved in Crystal's disappearance. As authorities indicated they lacked direct evidence, they allowed him to go home with his children. Crystal's family was outraged. Her uncle, Jeff, pointed out to the district attorney that Crystal had previously reported that Stephen had threatened to harm their children if she left him. Jeff was convinced of Stephen's emotional and mental instability. It wasn't until September 8, nearly 2 weeks after Crystal vanished, that the district attorney intervened. The children were placed in protective custody, and Stephen was brought in for questioning. However, Stephen controlled the situation. He requested to return home for one last night to organize things and promised to confess the next day. Jeff and other family members were angry, fearing that this unsupervised time might allow Stephen to harm himself and evade justice. On September 9, 2017, Stephen returned to the police station and confessed. He told investigators that during a heated argument, Crystal had told him she would be taking her new boyfriend, Paul, on a family trip instead of him. Due to this, he became enraged. While their children slept upstairs, he attacked Crystal from behind and strangled her to death. Afterward, Stephen wrapped her body in a blanket, placed it in the trunk of his car, and drove before sunrise to a wooded area near his home, where he disposed of her remains. Even after confessing, he still refused to reveal the location of the body unless the prosecutors agreed not to pursue the death penalty. Due to the damage caused by Hurricane Harvey and the time that had passed, authorities worried that they wouldn't find the body without his assistance, so they accepted his terms. Later that day, Stephen guided authorities to a remote, overgrown area, and Crystal's remains were discovered in an advanced state of decomposition. Stephen McDowell, who was 44 at the time, was charged with first-degree murder, and bail was set at $500,000, which he could not afford. In addition to the issues of jealousy and anger, the case also highlights a more terrifying truth. Without Crystal, Stephen would have no financial resources to support himself and his children. The pursuit of justice moved slowly, as the trial did not commence until June 2019. During this time, Stephen displayed no remorse in court. He tried to create the impression that he was a man suffering from pain, claiming he acted out of a sudden fit of passion, a defense strategy in Texas that could significantly lessen his punishment if accepted. He also suggested that Crystal's death was the result of a consensual encounter that went awry. However, the prosecution effectively countered this narrative, highlighting the ongoing emotional abuse and control he had imposed during their relationship. Stephen's defense team attempted to tarnish Crystal's reputation by presenting unverified text messages and claims that she had been unfaithful. However, her friends and family stood up for her, describing her as a vibrant and loving person dedicated to her children. They also shared experiences of the years of dysfunction and manipulation she endured. One of the most heart-wrenching moments during the trial occurred when Mandy Avalos, Crystal's lifelong friend and guardian of her children, took the stand. She recounted a painful revelation in December 2017, when Stephen and Crystal's 5-year-old daughter shared a secret. The girl recalled the morning her mother went missing. She had heard her parents arguing. After hearing the commotion, she walked from the bathroom into the bedroom, where she witnessed her father pushing her mother onto the bed and covering her mouth and nose with his hand. She stood at the edge of the bed and watched until her mother stopped moving. Afterwards, her father took her upstairs and told her not to speak about what she had seen. Mandy quickly reported the incident to the authorities, and she was placed in a trauma counseling program, but the emotional scars continued to haunt her. Another important witness for the prosecution was Melissa Cherry, Crystal's cousin and close friend. Melissa testified about helping Crystal move out of her home when her conflicts with Stephen escalated. Melissa later supported her move back home after Stephen threatened to harm himself if she did not return. Cherry recounted that even after the divorce, he continued to emotionally manipulate Crystal, including starving himself to make her feel responsible for his health. The day after Crystal went missing, Melissa and Jeff visited Stephen's house, where they found him looking anxious, shaking, and in tears. The daughter of Crystal and Stephen claimed that she had seen her mother the day before and pointed to a black dress in the closet in a concerning manner, saying that evil spirits had taken her away. This disturbing scene prompted Melissa and Jeff to call the police from outside the house, urgently requesting that they remove Stephen from the children's lives, but their requests were ignored. Melissa also shared her account of a family cruise that Stephen had suggested as a way to say goodbye peacefully. Although Crystal hesitantly agreed, she made it clear that there would be no threats, manipulation, or harm involved. However, as the trip approached, an argument over finances led her to cancel, realizing that Stephen was not genuinely trying to say goodbye but was instead attempting to win her back. The most troubling testimony came from an inmate who had shared a cell with Stephen and claimed that Stephen confessed in detail to killing Crystal. According to the inmate, the motive was a text message from another man. He described how Stephen admitted to using zip ties to bind Crystal's hands after her death, information only known to the forensic team. Officials from the Texas Department of Public Safety corroborated parts of Stephen's confession, stating that he claimed Crystal had arrived early on the morning of August 25, 2017. They had an argument, during which she told him that she had never really loved him. She encouraged him to move on with his life. In a fit of rage, he strangled her in the bedroom. The 5-day trial concluded quickly. The jury found Stephen McDowell guilty of first-degree murder in just 3.5 hours. On September 10, 2019, he received a sentence of 50 years in prison, with a requirement to serve at least 25 years before being eligible for parole, potentially allowing for his release in 2042. Crystal's family was heartbroken by what they perceived as a light sentence. Her uncle Jeff exclaimed in court that Stephen deserved a harsher punishment, while others expressed frustration, advocating for a life sentence or the death penalty. However, those options were not available due to the agreement Stephen made in exchange for revealing the location of Crystal's body. The family's main concern was not the length of the prison sentence but rather the emotional impact on the children. Despite being surrounded by love, they faced a devastating loss. Crystal had dedicated her life to them, and now they were left to cope with trauma that many adults would struggle to endure. By 2020, Mandy, who had taken in the children immediately after Crystal's murder, was working to adopt them legally. Some sources indicate that Mandy was Crystal's best friend from childhood, while others suggest they may have had a romantic relationship at one time. Regardless of their history, Mandy was Crystal's most trusted confidant and was committed to caring for the children. Now that you know the complete story, we would love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe Stephen McDowell received the justice he deserved? Please share your opinion in the comments. We are reading all of them. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Janet Loretta Tillman. Even the most pious image can conceal a dangerous person. Clever manipulators can deceive entire communities, gather loyal followers, and carry out sinister deeds behind their backs. The population of Vincent, Alabama, USA, is about 2,000 people, and here you can still encounter neighbors who are not afraid to leave their doors open or their keys in their cars. Timothy Dane Tillman worked at the local Renaissance Center and was considered the best preacher in town. Many looked up to him as a mentor and source of support. Nevertheless, the man's story turned out to be full of mysteries. Until 2000, Timothy traveled across the states, preaching the gospel. He managed to embark on an extensive pilgrimage from Florida to Minnesota. People responded positively to his words and felt supported by him. The pastor's wife, Janet Tillman, was a very modest woman and a caring mother who embodied the image of a priest's wife. She was always there, trying to support her husband throughout their marriage, during which they welcomed two daughters, the eldest, Jessica, and the youngest, Fanny, who seemed to withstand any obstacles and problems. The pastor never forgot that the foundation of his work was charitable activity, demonstrating this through actions rather than words. For example, when Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana, he saw an opportunity to support the community that was struggling to recover from the disaster. In September 2005, he proposed a fundraising event called the Hunt for Turkey, which was essentially an outdoor shooting range. The proceeds were meant to help those in need. Everything was organized as best as possible, but on October 22, 2005, after the third shot, one of the rifles jammed. The pastor, along with his wife, was concerned because the situation seemed quite dangerous. One of the church members offered to fix the gun, but Timothy declined, worried about the safety of the many children and strangers present in the church. He decided to put the gun in the trunk of his car, where it remained for 4 days. On October 26, Janet took the faulty weapon, while her husband took 2 other rifles, intending to store them under their bed. Janet went first, with Timothy following her. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the pastor's house. According to Timothy's confession, when he entered the room, the rifle hit the door frame and accidentally discharged. A bullet struck Janet, who was a couple of meters away from him. She was seriously injured and began to bleed in her husband's arms. As help arrived, she repeatedly told him that she loved him and their daughters. When the police and ambulance finally arrived, it was already too late to save Janet. The pastor was overwhelmed with grief, crying almost constantly and covering his face with his hands. The most devastating news for him was that his wife did not survive. At that point, few understood what had happened, and the police were preparing to take Timothy to the station for questioning and to record an official statement. He wandered around the church courtyard, blaming himself for inadvertently killing his beloved wife. Everyone knew him as a good person, incapable of any cruelty, and they wanted to support him, convinced that it had been an accident. When Timothy was at the station, he was able to give a full account of the incident to the police. He described what had happened in detail, explaining about the jammed rifle and that Janet had wanted to protect those present by putting it under their bed. He also mentioned that she had taken the 2 remaining weapons to the room, where one of the rifles accidentally discharged upon hitting the door frame. The police found him to be credible. He seemed like a decent person, a worthy member of society, and a pastor. It was hard to believe he had any malicious intent. Consequently, there was no reason to detain him, and Timothy was allowed to return home to his children. When Janet's sister learned this tragic news, she was shocked and decided to call her brother to share her feelings. The first assumption he voiced was that this was not an accident. They discussed everything and approached the police with their suspicions. After collecting all necessary data, the investigators decided to look into Timothy. To their surprise, it turned out that the church minister held 2 driver's licenses. One was issued in his name, and the other was in the name of Timothy Patrick McNally. Interestingly, the second license was issued just 4 months before the tragedy, raising suspicions and indicating that the pastor had something to hide. He reverted to his official name just a few days prior to the incident. During this time, the victim's family had been discussing secrets that had troubled her in the past, which now began to be confirmed in unexpected ways. From the very beginning, Janet's relatives were convinced that her death was not an accident, and they had good reasons for their suspicions. In fact, Timothy's relationship with Janet's family had always been strained. They considered him a liar and a manipulator, believing that he had deliberately turned Janet against them to the point where their connection was nearly severed. Despite these difficult relations, they felt obliged to say a proper goodbye to Janet and sought justice. Tension arose the moment the relatives of the deceased appeared on the threshold of the house where Janet had died. They didn't even shake hands with Timothy, as everyone thought he was the culprit. Janet noticed that the pastor was avoiding eye contact, and Timothy did not offer any words of greeting or apology but immediately began to express how much he loved Janet, insisted that he would never harm her, as if he were justifying himself. After several days of intermittent communication and observing all the oddities, Janet's relatives were convinced that she was a victim of deliberate murder. They even sent an email to the district attorney asking them to investigate, insisting that this crime was not an accident and believing that Timothy Tillman was the killer. After not receiving the expected response, Janet's sister, Joan, contacted the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. Subsequently, an FBI agent was sent to meet with the sheriff from the city police department. He was shown a recording of the police talking to Timothy. In this video, the agent did not notice anything suspicious. According to him, Timothy was acting scared and very confused, but this fear could have been caused by the death of his wife. Suspicions began to strengthen when the FBI agent learned about 2 driver's licenses belonging to Timothy from before the accident. From that moment, the agent decided to investigate the pastor's past in the hope of confirming or refuting the fears surrounding him. Curiously, the minister of the church had a far from holy past. From the outset, it became evident that he had a weakness for women, resulting in periodic infidelities. He liked to visit strip clubs, which was known to his wife, who initially felt outraged but eventually resigned herself to his behavior, choosing not to divorce for the sake of their children. Timothy married Janet in December 1983, their first daughter was born in 1986, and their second in 1991. The Tillman family lived in Jacksonville, Florida, where Timothy worked as a pastor. It was discovered that in 1986, Timothy was seen leaving a strip club, behavior that parishioners deemed unworthy for a preacher. Following their complaint, he was fired from the church. His sinful lifestyle could not be atoned for by the eloquence he possessed, forcing him to seek new employment. However, he became a pastor again, though not for long, as he was soon caught in an inappropriate relationship with one of the parishioners and was fired again. To avoid traveling around the country in search of a new position, he took a job in a prison. During this period, Timothy liked to call himself a policeman. In reality, he worked as a civilian, sitting at the entrance, registering those coming and going. One day, he encountered a call girl. Later, she claimed that he had abused her near her home. This incident was investigated, and the former pastor was subsequently charged and sentenced to 10 months in prison in Minnesota. The abuse accusation seemed too much even for the all-forgiving Janet. During this time, Janet decided she had had enough. Exhausted by his regular betrayals, she and her children chose to start anew. She contacted her relatives, who helped her relocate to Alabama, where she found a job in the same office as her sister. This reunion allowed her to learn just how sinful Timothy truly was, which ultimately ruined their relationship. Janet began working in the office and contemplated a career, finding it much better than continuing a relationship with a husband unable to control his animalistic urges. For several months, the sisters lived together. Janet even started to recover and forget about her problematic husband. Then, unexpectedly, Timothy called. He stated that he was being released from prison early for good behavior and wanted to surprise his family. He asked for forgiveness and swore he had reformed, constantly insisting that he loved his children and that Janet could not deprive their daughters of their father. Despite her deep disappointment and feelings of betrayal, Janet allowed her husband to return to the family. Close friends warned Janet that this was a bad idea, but she did not heed their cautions and began to distance herself from her family once again. The Tillman family reunited, and in 2000, Timothy vowed to leave his past behind. They began to attend the Assembly of God, where he befriended the pastor and gradually began to speak in the church. Over time, this eloquent speaker opened doors to other religious organizations. Thus, Timothy first appeared at a revival event in Vincent, Alabama, where his wife hoped everything would be different, wanting to avoid another move. In January 2003, when they visited the center, there was no pastor present. It seemed like an incredibly fortunate coincidence. Timothy volunteered to conduct the service and performed so well that they decided to hire him without conducting any additional checks or interviews. He was seen as a very talented and eloquent preacher. Gradually, the unholy father managed to become the senior pastor of the church while concealing his legal issues. He behaved with restraint around women and did not visit questionable establishments. Indeed, before hiring someone for such a position, they meticulously checked for any convictions related to abuse, and his previous dismissals from several churches could have posed a significant problem. Nevertheless, Timothy succeeded in hiding these incidents, typically using standard excuses like losing or forgetting his documents. It was astounding, but it seemed to have worked. A skilled manipulator could have talked excessively. In Timothy's biography, there was still nothing to cling to. Concrete evidence was needed to start building a case for premeditated murder. Eventually, the police became interested in the case and actively got involved in the investigation. Timothy was not informed about all this. He continued to lead an ordinary life, believing that he had fooled everyone once again, while the investigation's suspicions grew. Meanwhile, he took advantage of the support of the local community in every possible way. The locals rallied around him and his children. They supported their beloved pastor and even provided him with financial assistance. A few weeks passed. Suddenly, Timothy announced that he needed to leave his daughters with family friends for a while and attend a pastor's conference in Washington state. The event was expected to take a significant amount of time. It seemed strange that a man would decide to undertake such a long trip during this difficult period. The pastor's phone calls needed to be checked. During the trip, one number contacted Timothy more frequently than others. The contact was investigated and turned out to belong to a woman named Molly Bizzari. Considering that the pastor was traveling on a business visit, it seemed odd that he maintained constant communication with a woman, including evening conversations clearly outside of working hours since the death of his wife. It had been several months since he returned from his visit to Washington and attempted to start anew with his children. Unexpectedly, Jessica called her grandmother and reported that she had a fight with her father after discovering suspicious messages on his social media accounts. Judging by these messages, her father seemed to have been involved with Molly during his trip to Washington. The daughter was shocked to learn that he had forgotten her mother so quickly and found a new romantic interest. As a result, rumors began to spread that the pastor had a mistress for a long time, possibly even during his wife's life. In any case, now the pastor could have a motive for committing murder. Perhaps his relationship with this new woman had become serious, and he decided to marry her. Divorce is always long, difficult, and expensive. If he was indeed grieving for his deceased wife, who had died in an accident, he would not have so quickly pursued a new woman. Thus, the first confirmation of suspicions was found. Now it was necessary to determine when his acquaintance with Molly had begun. The police began to examine Timothy's emails and discovered that they had first contacted several years ago. It was an anonymous communication that he could maintain unnoticed. Interestingly, he had been trying to win Molly's favor for a long time. During this period, Janet worked a lot and did not suspect her husband, or perhaps she simply did not want to confront any potential infidelities. Meanwhile, the communication continued, and Timothy became more immersed in their long-distance relationship, clearly wanting to advance it to a new level. Gradually, he learned that Molly's father was a military man. At this point, he decided to create a fake identity and reveal it to his interlocutor. He posed as a naval officer. As it turned out, he even visited a military goods and paraphernalia store where he assembled a Navy lieutenant's uniform to impress his mistress. Now, before the detectives stood a man leading a double life, one with a wife he had buried and another with a woman on the side. The investigators were convinced that all of this was more than mere coincidence. The trip to Washington raised many questions. It was apparent that Tim had used a driver's license under a different name, which confused not only his mistress. The preparation seemed too serious. Until now, it was unclear why he would kill his wife if it was possible to simply get a divorce. Soon, the detectives had an answer. Perhaps a divorce could undermine his reputation in his new community, and he feared revealing the darker aspects of his personality. Additionally, it later came to light that he received a payout from Janet's life insurance after her death, which could also have served as an additional motive for murder. The detectives decided to meet and speak with other church employees. In addition, the police informed the public about the man's history of violations, including charges related to abuse. Many were shocked to learn that the pastor was capable of such atrocities and how insidious the liar was. However, there were supporters who viewed the accusations as a conspiracy against the holy man. Damage to the pastor's reputation was done. Detectives sought tension so that the suspect would begin to make rash decisions and mistakes. Many townspeople began to believe that Timothy had deliberately killed Janet. The whole scenario, which was being portrayed as an accident, seemed strange. The decision to take the weapon from the event to his home, specifically to his bedroom, did not seem justified. And now it seemed clear why the armed forces had acted this way. Rumors began to spread. Church members stopped feeling the same reverence after the preacher's speeches as they had before. On the contrary, uncertainty grew, and suspicions about him increased. Timothy stopped being trusted, and some openly expressed dissatisfaction with his behavior. Apparently, the tension led the pastor to turn to the church leadership after some time and express his desire to leave his post for another location. Despite everything, there were supporters within the community who provided him with financial aid and assistance with his move. The pastor claimed that he intended to take his daughters and return to Florida to be closer to his family. For the detectives, this looked like a disaster. The police officers from the armed forces did not yet have the necessary evidence to press charges and arrest the suspect. They were forced to simply watch as Timothy left Alabama. At some point, the detectives began to fear that he would escape justice, but investigators did not abandon the case and continued working to achieve justice for Janet. The situation changed rapidly after Timothy's departure. His sister called the police and reported a curious phone conversation that had taken place just minutes earlier. While she was at work, the phone rang with someone inquiring about Janet, identifying themselves as a representative of a credit institution. They stated that Janet had taken out a large sum of money on January 6, 2006, which was very curious since Janet had already died by that time. It was about $5,000, indicating that Timothy had used his wife's name and reputation to commit financial fraud. There were suspicions he could be involved in more such episodes. However, the most valuable implication was that it provided an opportunity to arrest him for fraud. This, of course, gave detectives a good opportunity to question Timothy about his wife's death. The suspect was not naive, so it was necessary to act carefully. The investigators knew the suspect well. They carefully analyzed his personality and behavioral characteristics. Therefore, they aimed to provoke a loss of self-control, which would allow them to secure a confession at the right moment. Although the chances were slim, this might have been their only chance. The detectives traveled to Florida for what would be one of the most challenging interrogations of their careers. It began as an ordinary conversation, and under pressure from the evidence, Timothy confessed to the fraud. He claimed he had financial difficulties after the death of his wife and the loss of his job, stating that he needed money for his move. Naturally, This was not the only thing the detectives wanted to discuss, so they smoothly changed the topic to the accidental shot that had occurred in his marital bedroom. Unexpectedly, his story began to shift. Initially, Timothy had stated that he accidentally discharged the weapon against the door frame. However, now he claimed that the rifle had slipped from his hands. He then added that he had accidentally tripped over the threshold when entering the room. All these inconsistencies provided the detectives with opportunities to exploit this change in narrative, particularly concerning the switch of the surname from Tillman to McNally shortly before his wife's death. Timothy had an excuse. He claimed that his brother was involved with Janet and that he did not want to be part of the Tillman family. Eventually, he decided it was foolish and changed his surname back. Of course, this strange story was not believed, and the obvious lies only strengthened suspicion against him. However, a confession or some material evidence was necessary. The officers spoke with Molly. She willingly agreed to cooperate with the investigation, stating that the trip to Washington was made for an engagement proposal, supposedly in August 2005, before his wife's death. According to her, Timothy had initially introduced himself as a divorced pastor, and that's how their relationship began. All this time, she believed he was free, but it turned out they were only separated by distance. He had surrounded Molly with lies about his military service, even claiming he was conducting secret missions on behalf of the U.S. government. He then recounted a tragic story about his ex-wife's death, presenting a different version of the accidental shooting. Previously, he had not mentioned anything like that. According to him, Janet had supposedly moved the rifles when the shot accidentally went off. In subsequent letters, Timothy referred to Molly as a kindred spirit and expressed his eagerness for their reunion, stating that she would become a mother figure for his daughters. In support of her words, Molly provided access to the correspondence she had with Timothy. Her entire story was confirmed that the main suspect had become engaged to a woman he had found while his wife was still alive. This only confirmed the suspicions against him. Timothy Tillman was again interrogated and immediately began to lose his composure. He shouted that he had not killed his wife, even though 6 months had passed since her death. But even then, the authorities still did not have enough evidence. The case was just being built, so Timothy was arrested for financial fraud. The man was extradited back to Alabama. Janet's family expected justice, but unexpectedly, Timothy was released from jail. It was too early to panic. This was a deliberate move. Timothy remained under suspicion, and the detectives wanted the killer to believe his story was being accepted. The list of charges against him was limited to forgery of documents, and for the next 5 months, Timothy lived in Florida with his daughters, hoping that all the bad was behind him. Finally, a case against the pastor was built, and they decided to charge him with the murder of Janet. He was arrested without warning. According to detectives, at that moment, his knees almost buckled from surprise. The big problem was the presence of only circumstantial evidence. Therefore, there was a high probability that the criminal would escape punishment altogether. However, the prosecution took this risk and sought a confession, which Timothy refused, opting not to accept a deal with the prosecutor's office. It was also unclear how the shot from the rifle was provoked. The prosecution had only one rule to prove guilt: the constant changes in testimony during interrogations and other lies. On the prosecution's side, there was a witness named Jimmy Abbott, the man who had brought the rifles to the shooting event. He had personally repaired and inspected the weapons before giving them to Timothy, ensuring everything was in good order and unloaded. They had only managed to shoot from one rifle, which jammed. Thus, to conduct an accidental shot with any other weapon, it would have been necessary to deliberately load it. Moreover, the pastor's decision to postpone the event because one gun jammed seemed strange, as it was possible to simply continue shooting with other rifles at the shooting range. Timothy's choice to take the rifles into his bedroom generally baffled everyone. A few days before the tragedy, Timothy wrote a letter to Molly's father, convincing him of his serious intentions. According to Timothy, he would soon solve all his problems, and they would get married. The prosecution believed that under certain circumstances, the defendant would kill again without hesitation. Timothy himself refused to testify in court. Despite using his classic method of presenting himself as a pious man, the jury saw through his lies. For many, his demeanor changed dramatically. The man who had been a spiritual leader for an entire community turned out to be a cold-blooded killer who did not even look at his children as he left the courtroom. Timothy Dane Tillman was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment in October 2009. Following this, there were numerous petitions, and even a retrial took place, but his guilt in the murder was once again confirmed. Timothy was also sentenced to 10 years in prison for forgery of documents and fraud. The killer remains behind bars and will probably never be released.